What you're about to hear will make you think twice about every late-night road trip you've ever taken. Welcome back to Voices from the Other Side, the only channel that brings you true horror stories that have been researched, verified, and documented. I'm your host, and tonight we're riding shotgun with America's truckers into their worst nightmares. Every single night, over 5 million truck drivers navigate America's most isolated highways. They see things the rest of us never will. They encounter people we pray we never meet, and some of them never make it home. What you're about to witness are 11 true accounts verified through police reports, news articles, and first-hand testimonies of the most disturbing encounters ever reported by long-haul truckers. These aren't creepypastas. These aren't urban legends shared around campfires. These are real events that happen to real people, and some of the perpetrators are still out there. The stories I'm about to share have been cross-referenced with official documentation, police records, and corroborated by multiple sources. This is what makes Voices from the Other Side different. Every nightmare you hear on this channel actually happened. Before we begin our journey into the darkness, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because Voices from the Other Side uploads the most spine-chilling true stories every week. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. If these stories give you chills, smash that like button. It helps other horror fans discover these verified accounts of real terror. And if you're a trucker with your own disturbing encounter, drop it in the comments below. Every story gets investigated for potential future episodes. Now, prepare yourself, because once we start this journey down America's darkest highways, there's no turning back. These 11 accounts will take you inside the cab with drivers who face their worst fears on lonely stretches of asphalt where help was hundreds of miles away. This is Voices from the Other Side, where every nightmare is real. And story number 1 begins now. Let's dive into our first story. And I have to warn you, this one will make you question everything you think you know about the highways you travel. Story 1. The Phantom Convoy on I-80. It's just past midnight when Danny Rodriguez, a veteran trucker with over 15 years on the road, finds himself driving through the barren stretch of I-80 in Wyoming. The dark highway is like a ribbon unwinding endlessly through the desolate landscape, with nothing but the low hum of his engine for company. His headlights slice through the thick, icy air, casting long shadows across the empty plains. Danny's used to the quiet. He's been driving long haul for years, and the solitude never bothered him. His truck is like a second home, comfortable, reliable, and built to withstand the long stretches of road between stops. He leans back in his seat, setting the cruise control at 55 mph, the radio playing static in the background. The air outside is bitterly cold, and even though he's used to it, the emptiness of the landscape outside his windshield always gives him the chills. Danny's mind drifts for a moment as he checks the clock on his dashboard. It's late, and he's got a long haul ahead of him. He's hauling a load of electronics, heading from California to Chicago. There's no rush, but he's running about 2 hours behind schedule due to weather delays earlier in the day. He's focused on getting back on track, but tonight feels different somehow. He can't put his finger on it, but there's an unsettling stillness in the air. The radio crackles, static breaking up the silence, and for a brief moment, he wonders if the signal is picking up something strange. But he shakes it off. It's probably just the usual Wyoming interference. As Danny rounds a slight bend in the road, Something catches his eye in the rearview mirror, a set of headlights. It's not unusual to see other truckers on this stretch, especially at night, but what strikes him as odd is that these headlights are keeping a constant distance behind him. 3 trucks, all running in perfect formation. At first, Danny doesn't think much of it. Truckers often travel in packs, especially when conditions are tough. There's safety in numbers, and he's done the same himself when the weather's bad. But something feels off about the convoy behind him. No matter how much he speeds up or slows down, the trucks remain a quarter mile behind him, never closing the gap. It's like they're tethered to him, and that thought sends a strange shiver down his spine. He adjusts his speed slightly, trying to get a better look at the trucks, but all he can see are their headlights, bright, cold, and unblinking. He tries to make contact on the CB radio, cycling through the channels, but all he hears is static. "Hey, convoy behind me, you guys copy? This is Danny, eastbound at mile marker 235. Anyone out there?" He asks into the mic. Nothing but more static, no response. He tries again, this time on channel 19, the unofficial trucker frequency, hoping for a reply. Still nothing. No chatter. Just the eerie silence of the radio, like the rest of the world has disappeared. Danny's unease deepens as the miles slip away beneath his tires. The convoy is still there, trailing him at the same steady distance. He adjusts his speed a little, but no matter what he does, they don't speed up or slow down with him. It's like they are in perfect sync with his movements. As he enters a particularly lonely stretch of highway near Laramie, the temperature begins to drop, and the wind picks up, howling across the plains. He turns on his headlights' high beam, but the night seems to swallow the light, giving the road an almost unnatural, oppressive quality. The highway stretches ahead into the darkness, and as Danny looks into his side mirrors again, he notices something that makes his stomach drop. The convoy of trucks hasn't changed position. They're still back there, maintaining that eerie distance. But this time, he can see them more clearly. 3 trucks, all older models from the 1980, the kind you don't see much on the road anymore. Their headlights gleam cold and steady in the darkness, but there's something about them that feels wrong. None of the trucks are using their running lights, just headlights. And despite the freezing temperatures and blowing snow, they are driving as if nothing's unusual. Danny's own truck is struggling to maintain speed, the icy road making it hard to keep control. But these trucks, they seem unaffected by the weather, gliding silently behind him like shadows. Danny's eyes flick nervously between his rear view and side mirrors. What's going on? Around the 250-mile marker, Danny sees a rest area up ahead. He decides to pull off for a break, hoping to shake the unsettling feeling creeping up his spine. He doesn't expect the trucks to follow him in, but as he steers his rig into the parking lot, he notices that the convoy is slowing down with him. The 3 trucks pull in right behind him, parking in a neat line at the far end of the lot. Engines running, headlights still on, cutting through the darkness like 6 glowing eyes. But there's no movement. No one gets out. No one gets in. Danny steps out of his truck, his boots crunching on the snow as he stretches his legs. The cold air bites at his skin, and for a moment he wonders if it's just his nerves making everything feel 10 times worse than it is. But the silence is deafening. The lot is deserted, no other trucks, no cars, no people. The restroom building is dark, and when Danny approaches it, he notices a handwritten sign taped to the door that reads, "Closed until further notice." The handwriting is shaky, almost as if written in a hurry. He doesn't think much of it, but the sense of wrongness grows stronger. He turns back to the trucks. Still nothing. Danny decides it's time to get back on the road. The cold is starting to seep into his bones, and the last thing he wants to do is stick around in the desolate rest area for too long. He climbs back into his cab, flicks the engine back on, and merges back onto the highway. He takes a quick glance in his side mirror. The convoy of trucks is still there, just as it has been for the past hour, trailing him at that exact same distance. He speeds up slightly, but they match his pace. It's not until he's about 50 miles past the rest area that something truly bizarre happens. As Danny approaches a long, steep grade, his engine begins sputtering. The temperature gauge climbs dangerously close to the red zone, and a faint smell of burning coolant fills the cab. Danny tries to nurse the truck to the top of the grade, but the engine dies just as he crests the hill. He pulls over to the shoulder, hazard lights blinking, praying the truck will hold for just a little longer. The convoy of trucks continues past as if they don't even see him. They don't slow down, they don't stop, they don't even acknowledge his presence. But as the third truck passes, Danny notices something that freezes his blood. The driver's seat is empty. There's no one behind the wheel. He watches in horror as the trucks continue on, their headlights disappearing into the night. Danny is left sitting in his broken-down truck, shivering against the cold. His phone has no signal. The radio crackles with only more static. He tries the CB one more time, but this time, something different happens. Through the white noise, he hears faint voices. Not just static anymore, but actual words. It's almost impossible to make out, but the faint sound of voices talking about road conditions and truck stops reaches his ears. Danny holds his breath, straining to catch more of the conversation. The voices mention a truck stop in Cheyenne that closed years ago and discuss avoiding a construction zone that Danny knows was completed over 15 years ago. It's like they're talking about the past, but the voices know exactly where he is. They mention his broken-down truck, and one voice even asks, "Should we go back and help him?" Another voice answers, "Nah, let him freeze. We've got a schedule to keep." A third voice, cold and indifferent, says, "He'll be joining us soon enough anyway." At that moment, Danny realizes the horrifying truth. The convoy wasn't just following him, they were waiting for him. But for what purpose? The CB radio crackles again. "Don't worry, Danny. The cold isn't so bad once you get used to it. We've been driving these roads for 37 years now. The winter nights don't bother us anymore." Danny stares at the empty road ahead of him, his breath visible in the frigid air. Before he can respond, he hears the faint sound of engines revving in the distance. He turns to look in his mirrors. The trucks are coming back. They're driving in reverse, at full speed. As they approach, Danny sees that the trucks look wrong. Their paint is faded, rust covering parts of the body. Ice crystals cover the windshields despite the fact that their engines are running. The lead truck stops directly behind Danny, and he hears the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow, slow and deliberate, coming closer. Then 3 knocks. The sound of the knocks echoes through the empty night, a slow, deliberate rhythm that feels like a countdown. Danny's heart races as he watches the figure approach his truck. He can't see anyone walking, though. The footsteps are there, but the figure seems to move in and out of his peripheral vision, as though something is manipulating the air around it, distorting reality. The knocks grow louder, more insistent. "Engine trouble, friend." A voice calls from outside, muffled by the wind but clear enough to send a chill down Danny's spine. "We can give you a ride." We know these roads real well, been driving them longer than most folks have been alive. Danny's grip tightens on the steering wheel. Every instinct tells him not to open that door. His mind races, calculating the risk. He's been on the road long enough to know that help from strangers is often a bad idea, but this isn't just a stranger. This is something far more sinister. The temperature inside the cab has dropped even further, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Come on, Danny." The voice calls again, softer now, coaxing him. "Don't be rude. We know you're in there. We know you're getting mighty cold. Open up and we'll get you warmed up real nice." The knock comes again, louder this time. 3 slow, heavy raps on the driver's side door. Danny feels the weight of the cold pressing down on him, his muscles stiff with the chill. His fingers are numb, but he refuses to move. He just sits there, frozen in place, staring at the door. The voice outside sounds friendly enough, but something about it is wrong. It doesn't match the tone of someone who's trying to help. There's a rasp to it, like someone who's been out in the cold for far too long, lips frozen and cracked. The knocking continues, but Danny doesn't move. He sits as still as he can, barely breathing, praying the figure outside will leave. He hears the sound of movement near the door, but when he looks through the side window, there's no one there. Only the 3 trucks, their engines running, headlights shining in the dark. The voice outside calls out again, almost in a whisper, as if it's trying to soothe him. "We know you've been on this road a long time, Danny. We've been here longer. You don't have to do this alone. Let us help you." Danny's mind races. He knows something is horribly wrong, but he's trapped. His truck is dead. The rest of the highway is empty. There's no one else for miles, and the temperature is dropping so fast that staying out here much longer could be deadly. Another knock, louder than the last, shakes the truck. "Come on, Danny," the voice urges again, this time with an edge of impatience. "We're not going to let you freeze out here." For a moment, Danny almost considers it. He's exhausted, his body aching from the cold. But just as he's about to reach for the door, something catches his eye. The trucks. They've stopped moving. They're parked in perfect alignment, engines running, but there's no one inside. No one behind the wheel. No drivers in the cab. Danny's blood runs cold as he realizes the horrifying truth. These trucks are empty. The drivers are gone. Suddenly, the radio crackles to life again, and Danny hears a voice. This one more familiar, almost comforting, coming through the static. "Don't open that door, Danny." It's a voice he recognizes. It's from the past, one of his old trucker friends, a man who had disappeared on this very stretch of road years ago. Danny's heart skips a beat. "Stay in the truck. Don't get out. They're not who they say they are." The radio cuts off abruptly, leaving Danny in a stunned silence. Danny stares at the trucks in his mirrors, the emptiness inside them gnawing at his sanity. The cold has seeped deep into his bones now, and the frost creeping up the windows only intensifies the sense of dread. His phone has no signal. His CB radio is silent, and the only sound now is the wind howling through the desolate highway. He clutches the steering wheel, the cold sweat on his palms making it harder to hold on. His breath comes in shallow gasps, fogging up the windows as the dark figures outside seem to watch him, waiting. The headlights of the trucks cast long, distorted shadows across the snow-covered ground, like they're stretching out toward him. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the trucks begin to move again, driving forward at full speed like nothing had ever happened. They pass by him, their headlights fading into the distance. Danny watches, heart pounding, as the last truck vanishes into the dark abyss of the highway. It's over, or so he thinks. His engine sputters to life. The truck is working again. He doesn't know how, but somehow it's alive. The radio crackles once more, but this time it's nothing but static. Danny pushes the accelerator, trying to make it back on the road. He watches the last truck disappear into the night. He doesn't know if he should feel relieved or more terrified than ever. But something feels different. As he pulls away from the spot where the trucks had parked, Danny glances at the empty highway ahead. The road seems to stretch on forever, and the weight of what just happened sinks in. These trucks, these phantom vehicles, weren't just following him. They were waiting for him. And now Danny realizes they were never really gone. His mind flashes back to the warning on the radio, the voice of his friend gone for years. He remembers what it said. Some roads hold on to their ghosts, and some ghosts aren't content to just haunt. They are still trying to complete their routes, and they're always looking for drivers to join their convoy. As Danny continues down I-80, the weight of those words presses on him. He knows one thing for sure now. He's not alone out here. The phantom convoy will be back, and the road, it seems, has a way of keeping its passengers. That was Danny Rodriguez's terrifying experience on I-80, where the line between the living and the dead blurred in the most chilling way. If you found this story unsettling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. We've got plenty more spine-chilling tales from the other side, so stay tuned for the next episode of Voices from the Other Side. Trust us, you don't want to miss what we have in store next. Until next time, drive safe and remember, sometimes it's better not to look too closely at the headlights behind you. Story 2. The Abandoned Town of Millfield. The sun is beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow over the empty highway stretching ahead. Lisa Patterson, a seasoned long-haul trucker, shifts in her seat as she checks her mirrors, eyes darting from the road to the dimming sky. The hum of her rig is the only sound, but it's not enough to mask the unease slowly creeping in. She's running late, and the detour she's just been forced to take could push her delivery time even further behind. Lisa Patterson had seen it all. Years of driving across the country had given her an unparalleled knowledge of every major interstate, truck stop, and shortcut. She prided herself on being able to navigate with nothing but her instincts and an old-fashioned paper map. But today, things were different. As she cruised along Highway 67, the familiar stretch of road near the Tennessee-Arkansas border, a sign appeared that hadn't been there the day before. Detour. Road closed ahead. Lisa groaned. She was already behind schedule, and the thought of taking another route didn't sit well with her. She flicked the turn signal and followed the detour signs, which led her off the main highway and onto a narrow, winding road through rural Arkansas. As the asphalt shrank beneath her tires, she couldn't help but feel a pang of discomfort. The landscape was unfamiliar, with dense trees crowding the roadside and the occasional crumbling farmhouse standing in isolation. The further she drove, the more the detour signs seemed outdated. Rusted and weathered, they looked like they'd been standing there for years. Lisa glanced at her watch. The time was ticking away. If she didn't find a way to make up for the delay soon, her customer would be furious. After what felt like an eternity on the winding back roads, Lisa's GPS signaled that she was nearing her destination. But as she rounded a corner, her headlights illuminated a peculiar sight. A small town appeared on the horizon, nestled deep in the woods. The town looked like it had been frozen in time, untouched by the hands of modern life. The houses were strange, old, but maintained. Each yard had children's toys scattered about, some tipped over, others still sitting in the grass, but all of them eerily clean and well preserved. The streets were too quiet. No cars, no people, just the remnants of a town long forgotten. Lisa's gut tightened. There was something unsettling about the place. Her usual instincts were failing her here. This didn't feel like a normal detour, and it didn't look like a normal town either. As Lisa continued driving through the town, she slowed the truck to a crawl. She had to stop. There was something off about the streets. It felt like she was being watched. The houses loomed silently on either side, their windows dark and vacant. She pulled over near the first house she saw with a porch light on. A small, white cottage with a perfectly trimmed lawn. A tricycle sat on the porch, tipped over in an unnatural way. Lisa stepped out of her truck, a slight shiver running down her spine as she approached the front door. She knocked softly, but there was no response. She knocked again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. Her curiosity got the best of her, and she tried the door handle, finding it unlocked. The door creaked open, and as Lisa stepped inside, she was greeted by a silence that was almost suffocating. Everything inside was meticulously clean, as though the house hadn't been touched in years. A strange, sweet smell lingered in the air, but there was no sign of life. Not a single person, only the dusty remnants of a once-lived-in home. She turned to leave, but as she did, something caught her ear. A soft, barely audible whisper echoed from somewhere deep inside the house. Lisa froze, her hand still on the door. The whispering grew louder, but it wasn't in any language she could understand. Lisa's heart raced as she turned back to look deeper into the house, but all she could see was the thick darkness beyond the dim glow of the porch light. The whispering continued, faint and unintelligible, as though someone or something was speaking from within the walls. The hairs on the back of Lisa's neck stood on end as a sudden sense of dread washed over her. She wasn't alone in this house. She could feel it, in the pit of her stomach. Someone or something was watching her. She stepped back quickly, slamming the door behind her and locking it in a flurry of panic. The whispers stopped immediately. Without a second thought, Lisa ran back to her truck, her mind racing. This place wasn't right. There was something deeply unsettling about the silence, the toys, the houses, and especially the whispering. She slammed the door of her rig and started the engine, eager to get out of this ghost town. But as she pulled away, she noticed something. Out of the corner of her eye, the porch light in the house she had just left flickered, then went out entirely. She glanced back at the town. The lights in the houses were all dark now, and everything had an eerie stillness to it. The feeling of being watched returned, but this time she couldn't shake it. Lisa drove through the town, trying to focus on the road ahead. She tried to tell herself it was just a weird detour, nothing more. But the more she looked around, the more the feeling of being in the wrong place deepened. As she passed another house, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Figures stood just inside the windows, motionless. The faces were familiar. They were people she had passed on the road earlier, but their faces were strangely vacant. No recognition, no warmth, just cold, empty expressions staring through the glass. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew these people, she had seen them, or at least their faces, somewhere else, but how? Lisa's mind raced as she tried to place them. She'd passed countless faces on the road, but these felt too familiar. She could have sworn she had seen them in the rearview mirror, right before entering the town. The figures didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there staring at her as she drove past. But as she sped away, she realized they weren't the only ones. Other houses, other windows, all showing faces she knew. But these were not people, they were too distant. They were watching her, but it was as if they couldn't see her at all. The longer Lisa drove, the more the town seemed to close in on her. The road twisted and turned in impossible ways, as if it were moving in circles, like the town was pulling her deeper into its grasp. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that she was being led somewhere, being watched. The houses on either side seemed to be growing closer, the streets narrowing with each passing moment. Lisa checked her GPS again, but the signal was weak. The map was blank, showing no indication of where she was or where she had been. Her phone had no service, and when she tried the CB radio, there was only static. She was cut off from the outside world. Suddenly, the road ahead began to change. The buildings around her seemed to distort, becoming even more surreal. The trees bent unnaturally toward her truck, as if they were being pulled into the town by an invisible force. The street signs, too, looked like they were made of paper, torn and frayed at the edges. There was no escape. Lisa's unease turned to full-blown panic as she noticed the figures from the windows were following her. They weren't in the houses anymore. They were walking down the streets, appearing in the shadows of every corner. The movement was slow, deliberate, like a procession of the lost. Her truck started to sputter as if it were losing power. The engine choked, the lights flickered, and the tires lost grip. Lisa stomped on the accelerator, but the truck only crawled forward, struggling to keep up. In her rear view, she saw the figures drawing closer, walking in sync with her truck. She could see them more clearly now, pale faces, hollow eyes, and mouths that were stretched wide in permanent, lifeless grins. They didn't move like normal people. It was as if they were gliding, floating just above the ground, never making a sound. Lisa's heart raced as the figures closed in, the chill in the air growing unbearable. The truck's engine finally gave out, the sputtering sounds giving way to complete silence. Lisa sat frozen in the driver's seat, her hands gripping the wheel as she tried to restart the engine. Nothing happened. The dashboard lights flickered one last time and then went dark. She was stranded. Outside, the figures had stopped moving. They surrounded her truck, blocking every exit. Their eyes, empty and black, stared into her soul. Lisa's breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to make sense of what was happening. She tried the door. It wouldn't open. The figures began to move closer, their eyes fixated on her. She had no choice. She had to get out. She had to run. As Lisa bolted from her truck, she realized something was terribly wrong. The street around her was no longer familiar. The road that had once been a detour was now part of a twisted, nightmarish landscape. The houses, the figures, they were all part of something far older than her. The truth about Millfield began to sink in. This wasn't a town, it was a prison, and the people she had seen weren't alive. They were the spirits of those who had never left, stuck in a loop for eternity. The dead never left Millfield. And now Lisa was going to join them. Lisa stood frozen in the middle of the street, the figures now surrounding her, their cold, lifeless eyes fixed on her. They whispered words she couldn't understand, but their meaning was clear. She had been marked. Lisa knew she had only one choice left: to run, to break free from the curse of Millfield and escape before it was too late. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest as she bolted down the empty street, the figures gliding after her like shadows. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The only thing she knew was that she had to leave this place before it claimed her, before the town of Millfield absorbed her into its endless loop. But as she ran, she heard one final whisper from behind her. "We miss you, Lisa. You'll always be part of Millfield." And then, silence. When Lisa finally found her truck again, the figures were gone. The town was gone, but she knew deep down they were always watching. always waiting, and someday the town of Millfield would come for her again. That was Lisa Patterson's harrowing encounter with the abandoned town of Millfield, where the past never truly leaves and the spirits of the lost wait for new visitors. If you're enjoying these eerie tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Voices from the Other Side. Your support helps us bring more chilling stories like this one to life. Until next time, remember, some places are best left undiscovered, and some ghosts never leave. Story 3. The Shadow on the CB Radio. The rhythmic hum of the truck's engine and the steady flow of Interstate 40 stretch out before Marcus Thompson. The night air outside is cold, and the road ahead seems endless as he cruises through the vast desert landscape of New Mexico. The highway is eerily empty, the moon casting pale light over the asphalt. Marcus, a seasoned trucker hauling auto parts from Detroit to Phoenix, relishes the solitude of these long-haul nights. It's just him and the road. Marcus had been driving for over 12 years and was no stranger to the quiet, solitary nature of the road. Most of his nights were spent in peaceful solitude, the only sounds being the hum of his truck and the occasional chatter on his CB radio. But tonight, something felt different. As he cruised through the barren stretch of Interstate 40 in New Mexico, his CB radio crackled to life. At first, it was the usual static, the kind he'd heard 1,000 times. But then a voice broke through. "Eastbound driver in the white Peterbilt, you've got a problem with your left rear trailer tire." The voice warned, crisp and clear, as though it were right beside him. "Better pull over and check it before you get a blowout." Marcus' grip tightened on the steering wheel, a chill running down his spine. He glanced in his mirrors. The highway was empty. There were no other trucks or vehicles in sight. "Who the hell is that?" he muttered to himself. He glanced at the CB radio, but it was silent now, as if the voice had never spoken. He checked his tire, but everything looked fine, until he remembered the odd sensation he'd felt earlier when driving over a rough patch of road. He brushed it off then, but now it seemed to nag at him. Marcus shook his head, dismissing it as nothing more than a prank from some bored trucker. But the warning had struck him in a way he couldn't explain. The voice, despite being strange, had a sense of urgency about it that made him uneasy. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, he thought, but the doubt lingered. With the memory of the warning rattling in his mind, Marcus decided to pull over at the next rest area to check his tire, just to be safe. It wasn't like him to ignore potential issues, and something about the voice made him take this extra precaution. As he parked and climbed out of the truck, he could feel the cold night air biting at his skin. He approached the trailer's left rear tire, flashlight in hand, and inspected it carefully. His heart sank when he saw it, a small bulge on the sidewall of the tire, something he hadn't noticed earlier. Marcus cursed under his breath. That's a blowout waiting to happen. He would have been stranded in the middle of nowhere if the tire had blown while he was driving at high speed. He made a mental note to get it changed as soon as possible. But as he stood there in the dim light, his thoughts were interrupted once again. As Marcus returned to his truck and began preparing to change the tire, the CB radio crackled again. The same voice spoke, sending a fresh wave of unease through him. "You're not out of the woods yet, Marcus," the voice said, its tone casual as if it knew him personally. "You've got some health issues you need to get checked out too." Marcus froze, his pulse quickened. How the hell does this voice know my name and about my health? Thought, his breath becoming shallow. The voice continued as though it was reading his thoughts. "I know about your daughter, Sarah. She's doing well in nursing school, but you really need to get that chest pain looked at, Marcus. It's not just heartburn, trust me on that one. Marcus' knees buckled slightly, and he grabbed the side of the truck for support. How did the voice know about his daughter and the occasional chest pain he'd been ignoring? He had never mentioned it to anyone, not even his wife. The voice was too familiar, too accurate. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling slightly as he keyed the mic. The radio buzzed with static for a few moments before the voice returned. "You really shouldn't ignore those signs, Marcus," the voice said softly, almost like a warning. "I know because I've been where you are, same mile marker, same blowout, same stretch of road." Marcus' blood ran cold. "Mile marker 127, he asked, his voice almost a whisper. The voice hesitated for a moment before responding. "You know it. It was my final stop, Marcus. I didn't make it past that point. You can see the cross when you get there. It's still there, waiting for you." Marcus' heart pounded in his chest as his mind raced. What the hell was going on? He glanced nervously at the road ahead, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The highway was still empty, and the cold wind whistled through the still night air. Marcus drove on, the eerie conversation replaying in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. His truck rumbled along the highway, and his eyes were constantly darting from the road to the CB radio, as if expecting the voice to come through again. As he neared mile marker 127, the voice returned, but this time, there was a note of finality in its tone. "You're close now, Marcus. You'll see the cross. It'll all make sense when you do." Marcus tightened his grip on the steering wheel as he approached the marker. His heart skipped a beat as the highway seemed to stretch out endlessly before him. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming now, and the shadows along the roadside seemed to move with a life of their own. He saw it. The white cross. A small memorial stood at the side of the road, adorned with faded plastic flowers. The sight of it sent a chill down Marcus' spine, as though the cross had been waiting for him all along. Marcus pulled over at the base of the cross, his truck's tires crunching over the gravel. He got out and approached the marker, his breath misting in the cold air. As he neared, he could see the name inscribed on the cross, Thomas Williams, and the years below it, 1962-2014. A haunting realization settled in his chest. The voice had been right. This was the same mile marker where the voice had warned him about the tire blowout. The voice, the warnings, the odd familiarity, it was all connected to this cross, to the trucker who had died here. Marcus bent down, running his fingers along the cold metal of the cross. As he stood there in the dead silence of the night, a creeping thought entered his mind. Was the voice really a ghost? Or was there something more to this story, something he was missing? Before Marcus could make sense of the connection, the CB radio crackled once more. This time, the voice was clearer, its tone somber. "You've got a second chance, Marcus," the voice said. "Don't take it for granted." Marcus stared at the cross, the words sinking deep into his soul. He had been given a warning, and now he had a choice to make. The voice had known things no one else should have. It had been there in the same spot, in the same place where Marcus stood now. "Are you really gone?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling as he spoke into the mic. The voice on the other end was still. The only sound coming through was the steady crackling of static. Then it spoke one final time. "I'll always be here, Marcus, just like the others, waiting." Marcus got back into his truck, his heart still racing, his mind a whirl of confusion and dread. As he continued on his journey, the eerie feeling of being followed returned. He kept glancing in his mirrors, expecting to see something or someone behind him. It was then that the CB radio crackled again. This time, it wasn't the voice of the mysterious trucker. "Marcus, you hear that?" A new voice asked. "You're not the only one, I've heard it too." Marcus was frozen in his seat. Another trucker, someone else who had heard the same voice. He keyed his mic. "Who is this?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "I'm Jake. Been driving this stretch for 20 years. Every time I hit mile marker 127, I hear the same damn voice. Warns me about something. My health, my tires, my family," Jake said, his voice tinged with anxiety. "I don't know if it's a ghost or something else, but it's real." Marcus felt his stomach churn as the realization hit him. He wasn't alone. Others had heard the same warnings, the same voice, and they had all been warned about mile marker 127. As Marcus spoke with Jake, he learned that several other truckers had experienced the same eerie phenomenon along the stretch of I-40. Each had heard the voice, sometimes about their health, other times about mechanical problems, and they all knew about the cross at mile marker 127. They weren't the only ones. The voice, or whatever it was, had been speaking to truckers for years, warning them about their fate on the road. Some had ignored the warnings and their fates were sealed. Others had taken heed and they had lived to tell the tale. The more Marcus learned, the more the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. This wasn't just about a random trucker warning others. It was about a curse. The voice was part of a pattern, a cycle that had been repeating itself for years. The dead trucker, Thomas Williams, wasn't just a victim. He was the one keeping the cycle going, warning others about the dangers on this stretch of road. Marcus shuddered as the truth dawned on him. The dead never truly left. Marcus continued his journey, but the presence of the voice, the cross, and the warnings lingered in his mind. He had escaped this time. But every time he passed mile marker 127, he would remember the chilling voice that had saved his life. He would remember Thomas Williams, and wonder how many other truckers were out there, still listening to the voice, still being guided by a shadow on the CB radio. The voice would always be there, guiding them, warning them, keeping the road safe for the living, at least for those who listen. That was Marcus Thompson's unsettling encounter with the shadow on the CB radio, where the dead continue to warn the living. If you're enjoying these chilling stories, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Voices from the Other Side. You never know when the next warning might come through your radio. Until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your ears on the static. Story 4. The Hitchhiker Trap. Angela Rivera had been a trucker for 9 years, a seasoned veteran who had traveled across the country countless times. Her routes were always precise, and she prided herself on knowing the ins and outs of every stretch of highway. But there was one thing Angela was firm on, her rule about hitchhikers. She had learned the hard way that picking up strangers on the side of the road could lead to trouble. She didn't care if someone was stranded or in need of help. Her truck was her sanctuary, and she didn't trust anyone enough to let them into her world. It wasn't a decision she'd made lightly. As a woman on the road, Angela had seen more than her fair share of creepy encounters and near misses. She had heard the horror stories from other truckers about dangerous hitchhikers and people with ulterior motives. But tonight, the cold winter storm raging outside made the rules feel less important. The icy winds howled outside her cab, and the snowstorm turned the highway into a blur of white. Angela's headlights barely cut through the heavy snow, and she found herself focusing more on staying on the road than anything else. Her fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel as she powered through the storm, the sound of the engine her only company. The snowstorm was making visibility almost non-existent, and she longed to find a safe place to pull over and rest. That was when she saw her, a figure standing in the middle of nowhere, alone in the freezing cold under the flickering light of her headlights. At first, Angela thought she had imagined it. The figure by the side of the road was nothing but a dark silhouette against the storm's backdrop. But as she got closer, Angela could see the details. No car in sight, just a young woman standing there in a thin jacket, her arms wrapped tightly around herself for warmth. Her hair was wild, blowing in the wind, and her face was pale, almost ghostly. Angela's stomach twisted. She instinctively slowed down as she approached the woman. There was something about her that made Angela's heart race, something that tugged at her, an urge to help. It was the cold, sub-zero temperatures, and the woman appeared to be completely unprepared for the storm. Angela's mind flashed back to her rule: never pick up hitchhikers. But her heart pushed the thought aside. The woman was in trouble, and something about her made Angela feel like she was meant to stop. Angela pulled over, the snow crunching beneath her tires as she slowed to a stop. She kept the door locked and rolled down the window a crack. "Hey, are you okay?" she called out, her voice barely audible above the wind. The woman looked up at her with wide, desperate eyes. "Please, I need help," she said, her voice treed. Angela's gaze shifted to the rearview mirror. There was no sign of any other cars for miles. The only sound was the howling wind and the sound of her own breath. There was no reason not to help her. With a resigned sigh, Angela unlocked the door and leaned over to open it. The woman slid into the passenger seat with a soft sigh of relief. Her name, she said, was Jennifer. She was in her early 20s, with wide brown eyes and pale skin that seemed almost too pale for someone standing out in a snowstorm. Her hair was wet from the storm, and her lips were chapped and blue. Angela noticed immediately that Jennifer didn't seem to be bothered by the cold. Angela had cranked the heat up, but Jennifer didn't react. She wasn't shivering like Angela expected someone in her condition to be. Instead, she sat there, quiet and composed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Angela couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine, but she kept driving. "So, where were you headed?" Angela asked, trying to keep the conversation light. She wanted to fill the silence, to break the tension she felt in the air. Jennifer didn't answer right away, her gaze focused on the road ahead. "Just to the next town," she replied softly, almost too softly. "It's not far, really." Angela didn't press for more details. She had learned over the years that people traveling alone sometimes wanted to keep their pasts to themselves. She kept her eyes on the road, the storm making it difficult to see even a few feet ahead. As the miles ticked by, Angela began to notice something strange. Despite the heat blasting through the cab, Jennifer still wasn't warming up. Her face was pale, and her hands didn't appear to be cold at all, even though they should have been. Angela couldn't understand it. How was she not freezing? "So, how long have you been walking out there?" Angela asked, trying again to make conversation. Jennifer's gaze flicked to her briefly, a slight smile on her lips. "Not long. I was just trying to find help," she said, her voice distant. Angela tried to ignore the nagging feeling growing in her chest. There was something off about Jennifer, something Angela couldn't put her finger on. Her instincts were screaming at her to stop the truck and ask Jennifer to get out, but something kept her driving forward, something she couldn't explain. "Well, I'm glad I found you," Angela said, trying to reassure herself more than Jennifer. "You're lucky. It's a bad night to be out in this." Jennifer nodded slowly, and for the next few moments, the only sound was the wind battering the truck and the hum of the tires on the wet road. But as Angela glanced at Jennifer again, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. Jennifer's eyes had been locked on the rearview mirror for the past few minutes. Angela's gaze flicked to the rearview mirror as well, and her heart stopped for a moment. There were headlights behind her, but no other vehicles in sight before. They weren't there before, and Angela knew it. The headlights were glowing bright, but they were too far away to be another truck. They seemed to be following her, matching her pace, staying at the same distance no matter how much she sped up or slowed down. She frowned and looked over at Jennifer, who was still staring at the mirror, her expression unreadable. "Are you expecting someone?" Angela asked, trying to sound casual, though her voice trembled slightly. Jennifer turned her head slowly toward Angela. "No," she said softly, almost too softly. "You need to keep moving. Don't stop." The urgency in her voice sent a chill down Angela's spine. She was about to say something when Jennifer suddenly leaned forward, her fingers tightening around the seatbelt strap like she was bracing herself. Angela's stomach turned. She wasn't sure if Jennifer was just nervous or if something else was happening. But the headlights weren't going away. They were still there, following her like a shadow. Angela glanced nervously in her side mirror. The headlights were now closer, way too close, and they had no right to be. No other car had been on this stretch of highway for miles. There was no way someone could have caught up with her so quickly. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she realized the truth. She wasn't alone. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as she kept the truck steady on the slick, icy road. The headlights behind her stayed close, staying just at her tail. She glanced over at Jennifer again, who was still staring at the rearview mirror, her lips twitching slightly into an almost imperceptible smile. Angela's throat tightened. Something was wrong. The calm in Jennifer's demeanor, her lack of concern, felt unnatural. Angela couldn't ignore it any longer. The truck was still warm, the heater blasting, yet Jennifer was as cold as ice. Her breath didn't fog in the cold air, and her skin remained unseasonably pale, like she had no body heat at all. Angela's pulse quickened as she stole another glance at her passenger. There was something deeply unsettling about her eyes, those cold, glassy eyes that never seemed to blink. "Are you okay?" Angela asked, her voice shaking despite herself. "You're not cold, I mean, you should be freezing." Jennifer tilted her head slightly, her smile widening ever so slightly. "I'm not cold," she said in that same faraway tone. "I don't feel cold." Angela couldn't breathe. This was impossible. This wasn't just a hitchhiker who had wandered into a storm. This was something else entirely. She had crossed a line by picking Jennifer up, and now she had no idea how to escape. Angela's truck began to slow for no apparent reason. The engine sputtered as if something was wrong with the fuel. She cursed under her breath, fumbling with the gears, but the truck refused to respond. Her headlights flickered. The whole system seemed to be malfunctioning all at once. "What's happening?" Angela muttered, trying to restart the engine, but the truck wouldn't cooperate. Jennifer's gaze never wavered from the rearview mirror. "It's time," she said, almost as if it were a command. Angela's heart sank as she felt the truck come to a complete stop. The eerie headlights behind her didn't stop either. They came to a halt as well, but still remained far enough behind that Angela couldn't make out the vehicle. Jennifer slowly turned her head and the air grew colder, the silence between them becoming more suffocating. Angela tried to open the door, but her hands were shaking too much to unlock it. Suddenly, Jennifer turned to her, her lips curled into a dark smile. "I told you, we need to keep moving." Angela's mind raced. The cold had spread throughout the truck now, and her breath formed visible clouds in the air. But the strangest thing was, Jennifer still wasn't breathing. Angela's eyes widened as she leaned closer to Jennifer. "You're not breathing," she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. Jennifer's eyes met hers, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. "I'm not real," Jennifer said, her voice barely audible, like it came from somewhere far, far away. Angela backed away, her hands reaching for the door once more, but it was locked. She wasn't just trapped in a truck with an unearthly passenger. She was trapped in a nightmare. The headlights from the vehicle behind her grew brighter. Angela could hear the sound of tires skidding across the ice, but they didn't seem to be getting any closer. It was as though something was circling them. Angela's thoughts were racing as the realization hit her with full force. Jennifer wasn't human. She wasn't alive, and she was part of something much larger than a random hitchhiker encounter. The coldness, the unnatural stillness, the way she didn't breathe, all of it pointed to one terrifying truth. Jennifer was part of a supernatural trap, designed to lure drivers like Angela into an inescapable nightmare. Angela grabbed the wheel, her mind reeling. The headlights behind her were now blinding, the truck shaking with the force of something enormous and unseen. She couldn't escape. The road was gone. The storm swallowed everything around her. Angela knew what Jennifer had meant when she said, "We need to keep moving." They weren't just being followed, they were being hunted. And soon, Angela would join the countless others who had fallen into the trap. Story 5. The Vanishing Truck Stop. Rebecca Santos, a seasoned trucker with more than a decade of experience, had seen almost everything the road could throw at her. She knew every major truck stop, diner, and rest area between California and New York, and she prided herself on her ability to navigate the desolate stretches of highway at night. But tonight, something was different. It was a dark and foggy evening as Rebecca cruised along Interstate 70 in Missouri, her headlights casting long shadows over the empty road. The hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio were the only sounds in the cab. The rest of the world outside seemed quiet, as if the storm that had just passed had swept away everything. Rebecca had been on the road for hours, and her eyelids were starting to feel heavy. She glanced at the clock on the dashboard, almost 2:30 a.m. She needed to fuel up and stretch her legs, but there wasn't much in this part of Missouri, just miles of farmland and sparse rest areas. As she approached mile marker 146, she noticed something unusual in the distance, a brightly lit sign for a truck stop. It was the kind of glowing welcome she needed after a long stretch on the road. The sign read Big Jim's 24-hour plaza, all services available. Rebecca squinted, not remembering seeing this truck stop before. She had driven this stretch hundreds of times, yet this stop was nowhere to be found in her memory or her trucking atlas. Still, the lights were warm and inviting, and the lot appeared bustling with activity. Truckers came and went, filling up, moving around, and going about their business. She didn't think twice as she steered her rig toward the fuel pumps. The truck stop was far off the beaten path, tucked between rolling hills, but it didn't seem unusual. She could use a quick break. As Rebecca stepped out of the truck and began fueling, she noticed something strange. The parking lot was nearly full, but the truckers moving around the lot seemed off. It was like they were in a trance, moving slowly without any real purpose. No one was talking. There was no chatter over the CB radio, no friendly exchanges between fellow truckers, just silence. Rebecca brushed it off as odd, but nothing more. Perhaps it was the late hour or the storm that had recently passed. But the longer she watched, the more uncomfortable she became. Everyone seemed to be moving mechanically, as though in a daze, their eyes hollow and distant. No one made eye contact. No one smiled or waved. Shaking off the feeling, Rebecca finished fueling and went inside to grab a coffee. The inside of the building appeared normal at first glance, brightly lit, with a clean diner and shelves stocked with snacks and drinks. The cashier, an older man with a friendly smile, greeted her as she entered. "Good evening, ma'am. Can I get you something?" he asked in a slow, deliberate voice, as though he had all the time in the world. Rebecca nodded, ordering a coffee and a sandwich. She didn't recognize any of the other drivers in the diner, but it was hard to ignore the strange stillness that lingered in the air. The truckers sitting at the tables didn't speak to each other. They just sat there, staring blankly ahead. It was like they were frozen in time. Rebecca paid for her food and returned to her truck. She needed to get moving. She was already behind schedule. But as she climbed into the cab and tried to start the engine, she heard a strange sputter. The engine refused to turn over. She tried again, pressing the gas pedal, but nothing happened. "Great," Rebecca muttered under her breath. "Just what I needed." She stepped out of the truck, looking around for help. The attendant who had served her inside was standing near the pumps, watching her. He gave a slow nod as if he had been expecting her problem. Without a word, he walked over. "Something wrong with your truck?" asked in a voice that was almost too calm. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, it won't start." "Let me take a look at it," the man replied, offering a reassuring smile. He was polite, if not a little too patient. Rebecca watched as the attendant, who introduced himself as Jim, popped the hood of her truck and took a look under the engine. His movements were methodical, almost mechanical, as he worked quickly to inspect the vehicle. "You know, you're lucky," Jim said, glancing up at her. "You've got a loose wire in your ignition system. Shouldn't have caused you any trouble, but it's good that you stopped when you did. A few more miles and you could have been stuck out here in the cold." Rebecca stood by, trying not to feel unnerved by the way Jim spoke, as though everything was business as usual. The way he casually went about fixing the truck made it seem like he had done this 1,000 times. Within minutes, Jim was back in the driver's seat, turning the key. The engine rumbled to life, and Rebecca sighed in relief. "Thanks," she said, offering him a smile, though it felt forced. "No problem," Jim replied with a nod. "Truck's good to go." Rebecca felt a bit of her unease melt away as she climbed back into the cab. She waved to Jim, who was now returning to his post near the fuel pumps. She didn't even think twice about the fact that he hadn't charged her for the service. She was just ready to hit the road again. As Rebecca drove off, she immediately noticed something strange. The truck felt different. The engine hummed a little louder than usual, and the vibrations felt a bit off. She tried to shake it off. Maybe she was just imagining things. But as she picked up speed, she felt an unsettling presence in the air. It was as though something had changed in her truck while it was being fixed. At first, she attributed it to nerves. Maybe it was the late hour, maybe the storm, but the further she drove, the more uneasy she became. Her GPS blinked on the dashboard. She glanced at it and saw something that made her blood run cold. The road she was on was not the same one she had entered from. The GPS showed she was still on I-70, but the exit she had taken to leave the truck stop didn't show on any map. She tried to pull up her route history, but it kept resetting itself, showing nothing but the barren stretch of highway ahead. Rebecca frowned. This couldn't be right. She knew she had exited at the right place, yet here she was with no clear route ahead. She glanced over at the side of the road, trying to focus on the familiar landmarks to reassure herself. But all she saw were trees and a few scattered barns. The world around her seemed to have disappeared. It was a few miles down the road when she noticed something else odd. The sound of the engine seemed different, hollow, almost like it wasn't working properly. She pulled over to the side of the road and popped the hood, just to check everything was okay. As she inspected the engine, she found something unexpected. An unfamiliar electronic device had been attached to the underside of the truck's engine compartment. The device was small, with blinking lights and wires that didn't seem to belong. "What the hell is this?" Rebecca whispered, running her fingers over the cold metal. This wasn't part of the original truck. There was no way it was factory equipment. A cold sweat broke out on her forehead as she realized that the device hadn't been there before. Whoever had fixed her truck had done more than just tighten a loose wire. They had attached something foreign to her truck. Rebecca's mind raced. Was it some kind of tracker, a monitoring device? She knew she needed help, so she immediately called the police. After a long, tense wait, the police arrived. Rebecca explained the situation, showing them the mysterious device under her truck and telling them about the strange truck stop she had encountered. The officers were polite but skeptical. They took down her information and promised to investigate. One of the officers suggested they go to the truck stop to check things out, but when they tried to get directions, something strange happened. The GPS system showed no truck stop at mile marker 146. Rebecca tried to tell the officer where she had stopped, but when they tried to look it up, there was nothing there. No Big Jim's 24-hour plaza, no fuel pumps, no trucks, nothing. The officers looked at each other in confusion. "Are you sure about the location?" one of them asked. Rebecca nodded, pointing to the map on her dashboard. "It was just there, I swear. I filled up, talked to Jim." The investigation didn't turn up any concrete answers. In fact, the officers could find no record of the truck stop ever existing. They couldn't find any buildings or trucks in the area where Rebecca had stopped. The land was empty, save for a few abandoned barns and fields. "This doesn't make any sense," Rebecca said, feeling a cold knot form in her stomach. "I know what I saw. That truck stop was there. It was full of trucks." One of the officers, a younger man, looked at her with sympathy. "I know this stretch of highway well. There's nothing out here for miles except open fields and a few farms. No truck stops." Rebecca shook her head. "But it was there, I swear to you." The police left her with an unsettling feeling of confusion. They said they would look into the situation further, but Rebecca didn't hold out much hope. Her gut told her something was terribly wrong. The next day, she dug deeper into the mystery. She spent hours researching, trying to find any history about the truck stop, but everything about Big Jim's 24-hour plaza was gone. There were no records, no mentions of it anywhere online. Even the name seemed strange, too generic to be real. She stumbled across something chilling on a trucker forum. Other drivers had reported similar experiences with the same phantom truck stop. They spoke of seeing it, then arriving to find it was just an empty lot, with no signs of life. Some had even described seeing the same strange, sleepwalking drivers moving in the lot, just like she had. The stories were all eerily similar. Some drivers claimed they'd been stuck there for hours, while others reported finding their vehicles modified in ways they couldn't explain. Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that she had narrowly escaped something sinister. But as she prepared to leave Missouri, she received a chilling message. She found a postcard in her mailbox, sent from the same Big Jim's 24-hour plaza, with a picture of the truck stop and a message that read, "We miss you. Your sleeping room is still available. Come back soon." Her heart pounded as she read the message. The postmark was recent, but the return address was a post office that didn't even exist. Rebecca knew she had to get out of Missouri. She couldn't shake the feeling that the phantom truck stop was still watching her, waiting for her to return. As she left the state and drove into the next, she saw the same trucks from the stop in her rearview mirror. But they were fading away, disappearing into the distance. It was as if they had been following her all along, waiting for the right moment to make their move. But now she was free. For now. Rebecca's experience at the vanishing truck stop haunted her for months. She avoided the area where she had stopped that night, and even found herself looking over her shoulder whenever she passed a truck stop. But the stories she found online continued, and every time she thought she could forget, she'd receive another postcard or hear a rumor from another trucker about Big Jim's 24-hour plaza, a place that should not exist. Rebecca never stopped driving, but she learned to trust her instincts above all else. Some places, she realized, were better left untouched. That was Rebecca Santos's terrifying encounter with the vanishing truck stop. What do you think? Was it a haunting experience or something far darker? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Voices from the Other Side for more chilling tales from the road. Stay safe out there, truckers. Portland called late morning on the second day. A calm voice with no last name and the kind of patience that build by the quarter hour. "Mr. Mitchell, we're delighted you're making good time. We'll have a crew ready on arrival. Please bring the armoire directly to the rear outbuilding. Do not unload in the street. City ordinance prefers a curb unload," James said through a mouthful of truck stop eggs. "I prefer things too," the voice said, unbothered. "We'll pay in cash upon confirmation of condition." Cash. He hated cash. Cash meant no trail. He told himself that was someone else's problem. He told himself he only moved what people already owned. The closer he got to Oregon, the brighter the world grew. The thing in his trailer didn't care about landscapes, but James did. Snow thinned to rain. Rain thinned to a fine mist that turned the pines into exclamation marks. He made a last fuel stop east of the city, and on an impulse that felt like standing on a high dive and jumping because the alternative was never jumping again, he called Claire a second time. This time she picked up. Her voice sounded like she'd been holding it under for too long. "Mr. Mitchell, you were right about expansion and contraction," he said. "Word to the wise, don't keep any more sentimental brass near it." Silence. "Then you should deliver it and leave." The words landed heavy, a sandbag thrown from a rooftop. Don't help them put it where they want it. Where do they want it? Where it works. A door shut on her end, or maybe she just put her hand over the phone. "There are maps within maps," Claire said, voice lower. "Cabinets within cabinets. Do you understand me?" He didn't. He also did. "I'll call you once I'm empty." "You won't," she said, "but I hope you do." Portland's GPS maze funneled him into a neighborhood where the houses bragged about timber money whispered across 3 generations. The address led him to a long driveway veined with wet leaves. A house at the end smiled with a lot of teeth. Behind it, a carriage house hulking with purpose. 3 men in black rain slickers stood waiting like chess pieces that had learned to walk. A woman was with them, late 50s, hair scraped back, face that made you want to apologize for things you hadn't done. MS. Sloan, the woman said when he'd hopped down from the cab. Thank you for your punctuality. Mitchell, he corrected because he needed to retain the fact of his name in this place. You want this around back. As discussed, she glanced toward the main house. In a window, someone watched and then didn't. Please don't be alarmed by our precautions. Antique wood minds the weather. The carriage house doors were open. Inside, racks and drawers rose in tidy stacked rows, each labeled with tiny tags. The air had the dehumidified tang of a museum that didn't admit the public. He backed the trailer into position and broke the locks. When he lifted the door, the air that spilled out smelled like old rain in a cellar. The armoire waited, squared and obedient in its straps. The raincoat men came forward with padded dollies. We'd prefer to handle it from here. MS. Sloan said. You may watch to confirm it leaves your trailer undamaged. She smiled without malice. Contracts are protection for both of us. He could have let them. He was paid to let them. Instead, he stepped up into the trailer and laid his hand flat against the armoire's face through the moving blanket. Beneath the fabric, the carved figures pressed back in relief against his palm, wings, ribs, a mouth. The mouth was open. He felt that as absence more than shape. We need to know the key is functional. MS. Sloan said lightly, too lightly. A formality. I was told keys are your business, James said. She held out a palm. We prefer to witness the integrity of the lock. Claire's instructions rattled like a coin jar. Don't try the lock. Don't put it where it works. He reached into his pocket and felt the key he hadn't touched since Savannah. It was heavier than it should have been. It also felt weirdly happy to be there, like an old dog that has found the leash in a closet and is wagging. He considered. He decided. Delivery complete on movement, he said. Lock's your formality. For a beat too long, MS Sloan's smile froze, then she nodded. Of course. To the men, proceed. They waited until the armoire's base cleared the lip of the trailer before they moved fast. The dollies rolled, pivot, glide. James watched the way MS Sloan's head tilted, tracking the armoire like a falcon tracks a mouse in rough grass. It wasn't greed. It was relief. At the carriage house threshold, a gust of wind slapped rain into the opening. The moving blanket billowed. For a heartbeat, wood showed. The carved angels' faces were turned inward as if they were trying to look into the armoire, not out. Careful, MS, Sloan said. Her voice cracked, the first imperfection he'd heard. Inside now. The armoire crossed the threshold. The light in the carriage house dimmed like a cloud had passed over the skylights. No clouds had. James knew that without looking up. The men wheeled it to a far wall and stopped by a waiting bracket built to the armoire's measurements down to the millimeter. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. MS. Sloan said, already across the room, already drawing a key from somewhere he could not see. Your envelope. He took the cash without counting. He took one last look at the armoire. Its lock quivered. He felt it from 10 feet away, a hummingbird's heartbeat caught in a bell jar. The hum swelled until it was almost audible. Don't, he said, and realized he'd spoken aloud. MS. Sloan hesitated and then smiled again, brittle glass reassembled. We'll attend to the rest in private. To one of the men, escort Mr. Mitchell out. He wanted to argue. He wanted to know. He wanted to leave more. In his mirror at the end of the drive, he saw the carriage house doors swing shut. The trees around the property leaned a fraction in toward the roof like parishioners at a gospel. The storm broke for real when he hit the freeway, a slate curtain that erased the lines of the city and left everyone's world reduced to their windshield wipers. James should have felt lighter without the armoire riding the bulkhead. He did not. The cab felt overfull, as if a crowd had come in to occupy the passenger seat, the footwell, the space behind his ear where a friend leans when they want to be heard. At the first pull-off, he braked too hard and sat breathing while the hazard lights ticked. He opened the glove box because he already knew what he'd find. The cloth pouch was back on the seat. He hadn't put it there. The brass tag lay on the pouch like a coin on a tongue. He picked it up before he could talk himself out of it. The engraved numbers had stopped being numbers. They were names again, as they'd been for an eye blink in Georgia. The column had lengthened. At the very bottom, fresh as wet ink, J. Mitchell. "No," he said, and his voice had nothing to attach to. He heard it and he didn't believe it belonged to him. The tag vibrated harder, not malicious, compelled. Beyond pleased and displeased, he stared at his name until the letters disarranged themselves into scratches. He looked up. The rain had stopped without getting less. The world outside his windshield was motionless, like a photograph with gloss still drying. The passenger door handle clicked. He looked. It did not move again. He looked back at the tag. One line above his name, a note wrote itself in a hand he recognized too late. Driver's choice. "What are my choices?" He asked the empty. He meant it as a joke. He meant it as a prayer. The cab air changed. Not pressure, preference, a suggestion. The kind of nudge you feel when you stand in a doorway and your body cannot remember whether you were coming in or going out. The phone rang. Unknown number. He answered because habit is a net and he needed nets. Mitchell. Claire's voice, thin and echoing as if from a tiled room too far underground. "Don't let them open it there." "They have it," he said. "They didn't open it in front of me." "Then they will open it when the light's wrong," she said. "When the bracket is true, they'll feed it. They call it collecting." Her breath hitched. "I called the police once. They came to inventory. The list didn't keep still long enough to write. Names run when they know they are about to be read." "I'm on I-84, he said. "What can I do?" "You drove a door across a country," she said. "So you tell me, what do you do with a door that shouldn't be used?" He thought about burglars and deadbolts. He thought about the wind in New Mexico. He thought about the little boy he'd been who figured out how to keep the closet closed with a chair under the knob because the house made noises at 2 a.m. He thought about gasoline. "Don't," Claire said as if she'd heard the thought. "It doesn't like fire, but it learns from it. It keeps the heat." Then what? His name on the tag had cooled. It lay there like a threat that had never needed to raise its voice. "Name them," she said. "Things that keep you above water. Read them faster than the wood can hush them. Read them into the air." Her voice steadied, something like hope threading it. "The armoire eats silence, James. It does poorly on noise that knows itself." He laughed because it was insane. He kept laughing because he could hear his heart resetting to a beat he recognized. "You want me to stand in a murder museum and narrate. I want you to make it choke. A click, not a disconnect. A door closing very softly." He U-turned across 3 lanes and did not care who honked. He drove back through rain that stopped being rain and started being time. He drove until the driveway's wet leaves whispered under his tires like paper. At the carriage house, the doors were not locked. He stepped inside. The air was colder than outside, colder than glass. MS Sloane stood beside the armoire with her key. The men flanked her. The blanket was off. The wood drank him like always. "Mr. Mitchell," said as if he were a guest late to cocktails. "Is there an issue?" He didn't give himself time to think about how to speak. He read the first name on the brass tag. "E. Wainwright," he said, loud and clear. He glanced at the armoire's lock. The brass shivered. "J. D. Pell." A crack sounded from inside the wood, a dry little pop like a seed coat splitting. "Sister Agatha." "Stop," MS Sloane said very quietly. The men shifted like sleepwalkers jolted. James didn't stop. He read down the list. He pulled names from the card he'd only half seen in Arkansas, names that had planted themselves behind his eyes without permission. He read his father's name because he could, because no wood had a right to it. He read the make and model of his truck. He read the saints you aren't supposed to say out loud if you don't mean it. He read 3 jokes that never failed at a bar on a slow night. The lock rattled like a bucking horse trying to fling a bit. The carvings moved, no longer a trick of angle but motion, the angels turning their faces toward him, mouths widening, not to smile, not to scream, but to breathe. "Enough, MS." Sloane hissed, shouldered past the men, jammed the key into the lock. The key did not like the lock anymore, not with noise rushing into the quiet it wanted to make. The key stuck half a turn. The men tried to hold the armoire steady. It didn't want steady. James took his last good breath and did the thing you don't do with old wood. He kicked the left door hard where the latch seats. The crack that answered wasn't a fracture. It was a note, low, resonant, furious. The door jumped. The key turned accidentally the rest of the way because chaos sometimes completes what order cannot. The door swung open. Inside was not inside. Inside was a corridor of cold, lined with cabinets upon cabinets upon cabinets, ranks of wood and brass knobs marching into a depth that the carriage house could not hold. The smell of tide pools and attics blew out. The first figure nearest the threshold saw James, not MS. Sloane, not the men, him, and did the friendliest thing a ghost can do. It leaned back. He understood. He began to read again, faster. The names came out of him without asking. Behind MS, Sloane, the men cried out once. He did not look to see why. He threw his shoulder against the right-hand door to keep it from closing. It wanted to close. It wanted to. He pressed and shouted names and between the syllables said, "L," better than the whisper in Alabama had said it. "Let," better than the voice at his ear had asked. "Them." He was crying now, which amused him in a slanted way. "Out." Something let go. It was a pressure he didn't know he'd been born into. The corridor's cold shifted from owning to leaving. Figures, not shapes, not shadows, people stepped forward across a threshold that was not floor. Some flickered like bad film. Some looked new as the day they'd been put away. One woman in a plain dress touched James's wrist. Her fingers were not warm, they were not anything. He felt them anyway, deep in the bone, a gentleness made of the right to breathe. Behind him, MS Sloane made a sound like a child who has misplaced her mother in a store. "You don't know what you've done," she said. He didn't, and he did. He kept reading until his voice frayed. When no more names were left on the tag, the corridor folded itself like a closing fan. The doors swung toward each other. James stepped back in time. The lock seat met its mate with a finality that made his teeth ache. The room exhaled new air it hadn't been allowed. The men were on the floor. They'd be fine or they wouldn't. He had no more power to decide that than he'd had yesterday to stop rain. MS. Sloane stood with the key in her palm. staring at the armoire the way a person stares at a long-time lover when they realize modestly late that this person was never theirs. "You'll have to find another cabinet," James said. He sounded terrible. He sounded alive. "Maybe find a hobby that isn't people." He left. On the driveway, rain started for real again. The city's noise rolled back in like surf. In the cab, he reached for the cloth pouch and found it empty. The brass tag was gone. He didn't look for it. He started the engine. He drove east because east felt like the right way to go if you'd been west too long. That night, in a motel off the interstate, he woke to a soft knock that wasn't at the door. He sat up. On the chair by the window sat a little wooden angel, crudely carved, smiling with all its teeth. It had been left on the desk at the Savannah house in a photograph he'd half noticed. He picked it up. It was warm. He put it back down and slept again. In the morning, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He swiped. A woman's voice, calm, local news anchor calm. "We're collecting stories for a series about the armoire that burned in Portland last night. Did you transport it? Witnesses say they heard names being read." He laughed and didn't. "Never met a cabinet I liked," he said, and ended the call. On the shoulder miles later, he pulled over. He wrote his name on a napkin and said it out loud so the road would know him. Then he said 3 more names of people he loved, and 3 names of truck stops that had never done him wrong, and the names of a dog and a song and a town whose water always tasted like pennies. He folded the napkin and put it in his wallet and went back to driving. Outside, Tennessee made promises Georgia would keep. Inside, the space behind his ear felt empty in a way he could stand. Somewhere, a corridor closed. Somewhere else, a door that had always been there and always will be there waited for the next fool or hero or courier who thought their job was only to deliver. James drove with the window open an inch to let the old air out. If he listened hard, he could almost hear someone singing in French. Very softly, very free. Story 7. The Phantom Memory Road. Patricia Williams trusted clocks more than people. Clocks didn't stall for excuses or tell you what you wanted to hear. They just ticked. After 16 years on the road and a spotless on-time record, she'd earned a reputation. If your load had a deadline stamped in blood, you called Patricia. She wasn't flashy, no neon underglow, no pet bull terrier riding shotgun. Just a clean white Kenworth, a thermos of black coffee, and a battered paper planner with penciled margins neat as stitches. The call came on a gray Monday outside Columbus. Urgent, the dispatcher said. Medical equipment, temperature controlled, high value. Pick up at a pharmaceutical facility out past the Beltway. Delivery to a research hospital in Reno by Thursday at 7 a.m. sharp. The pay was fat enough to make anyone say yes. Patricia said yes because of the clock. At the facility, security was tight. Barbed fencing, badges that beat, a guard who looked at you like you were already lying. Men in paper suits supervised the loadout. The crates were anodized aluminum, each with a small display blinking green numbers. Internal temp, pressure, something called field stability that meant nothing to her. A tech affixed a gray module the size of a paperback to the bulkhead near the nose of the trailer, then synced it with a tablet using a series of chirps. "That thing ride with me?" she asked. "Monitor only," the tech said, voice flat behind his mask. "Telemetry. If any parameter exceeds bounds, you'll get a tone. Do not open the crates. Do not alter the power feeds. Do not deviate." "Yes, sir," Patricia finished, a smile just shy of friendly. He didn't return it. He slapped a red tamper seal over the trailer lock. The sticker said "Do not open" in angry font. Beneath, in tiny print, a penalty clause ran like a seam. She checked her straps twice, clicked every ratchet by muscle memory, and pulled onto I-70 West with 3 days of road unfurling like a long lane at a pool. Rain threatened, then reconsidered. Her thermos steamed. The Kenworth purred. You don't notice an interstate until it stops being an interstate and starts being a room you can't leave. The first time she passed mile marker 159, white post, green numbers, she didn't notice it at all. She was thinking about Bloomington traffic and where she'd stop to sleep. The second time, 20 minutes later by her dash clock, she noticed in the way you notice a déjà vu, a static pop at the edge of thought. The third time, she said, out loud to no one, didn't I? She set the cruise and watched the mile markers like a teacher watches a class. 156, 157, 158, 159. Then 156 again. She slowed to 55, 157, 158, 159. Then 156, as if 160 didn't exist and never had. She scanned her mirrors. The world was present, soybean fields lacquered with standing water, a windbreak of skeletal cottonwoods, a billboard for an exit she never reached, try Betty's Pies, since 1949. The sky, a Midwestern dishwater lid, hung where it always hung. The radio played a call-in show about minor league baseball until the callers started repeating themselves in not quite the same words. She pulled to the shoulder and put on her hazards. Trucks blew past, indifferent. She switched the Kenworth off and on again like you do with misbehaving technology. Her GPS continued to insist. Westbound I-70, mile 159, Illinois. She tried her CB. Breaker 19. Anyone got an eye on I-70 west of Effingham? I'm seeing something odd with the markers. Static, a hiss that could have been weather or laughter. The gray module in the trailer chirped. It wasn't loud, but in the small universe of the cab, it was an alarm that thought better of itself. Patricia slid down and walked the length of her rig, boots crunching grit. She palmed the trailer wall. It was cool despite the mild day. The module's display showed a new line she hadn't noticed at pickup, Phi Drift. The number ticked up a tenth, then down a hair, like a fever that wasn't committed. Monitor only, she muttered and knocked her knuckles against the aluminum. The sound didn't return to her. It went somewhere and didn't come back. Back in the cab, she did what you do before you admit something is wrong. She tried again. She drove 5 miles according to the odometer and passed mile 159 3 times. She drove 10 more and passed it 6 more. She laughed once, a short bark, because laughing uses a different part of the brain than panic. When that didn't help, she pulled onto the shoulder, set the brake and pressed her forehead against the wheel. The small stitched grooves left a neat pattern. She had the childish thought that if she fell asleep, maybe she'd wake somewhere else. She didn't sleep. Okay, she said. Okay, Patricia. Saying your own name helps remind you you're real. We troubleshoot. The technology she understood fit in her hands. Straps, locks, paper maps. She unfolded the atlas she kept for nostalgia and spread Illinois across her lap. Roads do not loop themselves, not in this boring county. Not without an overpass you can see from space. She traced with her finger. Here was the exit for Betty's Pies that never arrived. Here was a farm store advertised by a cheerful cartoon chicken. She called the number for the farm store. The call connected and rang until it bled into a high sine tone that lodged in the soft place behind her eyes. The module in the trailer beeped again. Then the crates began to hum. At first, she thought it was road noise, a notch above her engine. But the pitch drifted in a way engines don't. It rose, steady as a kettle, until her teeth buzzed. In the mirror, she saw light leak around the edges of the trailer door. Not bright, more like the suggestion of a star behind a thin cloud. The red tamper seal looked unsubstantial as a sticker in a school notebook. The humming synced her heart without her consent. That scared her more than the light. She killed the engine to listen. The hum persisted, a steady B-flat. She tried the CB again. Anyone copy? I've got a problem with a specialized load. Mile 159. Her voice lilted up at the end, asking for a teacher. Static answer. Then a glutinous voice she didn't recognize said, "Keep driving." The syllables didn't so much vibrate her speakers as vibrate the air around her head. She clicked the radio off with a force out of proportion to the click. Her phone had no bars and 3 voicemails dated a week from Thursday. She didn't listen to them. She didn't want to know who she was in messages from a future that notarized itself without her. She had rules for trouble, laminated in her head. Make yourself visible. Don't leave the cab unless you have to. Call for help until someone answers. If the road is a problem, find a building. The problem was the building. There were none. The horizon was withholding. The sun refused to decide whether it would set. She watched her watch tick 1 minute forward, then cycle that minute like a favorite song. Her odometer stopped counting. The thermos coffee didn't cool. She started the engine and, without planning the sentence, said to the air, "I'm not here for your experiment." Saying "you're" made it easier. It made the problem a person. "I'm a driver. My job is to go where I'm going." The hum changed in flavor, not volume. It thinned, like someone stepping into another room and leaving the door ajar. The light at the trailer edges pulsed once, twice. Her dash clock lost a minute it hadn't earned. She put the Kenworth in gear. 156, 157, 158, 159, and then 156 again, as reliantly as breathing. Time isn't a thing on the road until it becomes the only thing. In the loop, time was an animal pacing the fence line. She tried to outpace it. She failed. She tried to trick it by varying her speed. She failed. She tried to reverse for 100 yards. The mile marker ahead still said 156. When fear was a steady diet, her brain got particular. That's what long haulers don't tell rookies. Panic burns out fast. Attention lasts. She began to notice the repetitions, imperfections. The billboard for Betty's Pies had a barely different blue each pass. The dead cottonwood took 2 leaves off on one loop, put 1 back on the next. On the 3rd loop, a hawk sat on a fence post. On the 4th loop, the hawk was a crow. On the 5th, nothing perched, but the fence post wore a scrape it hadn't worn before. Her trailer's hum changed pitch and step with those changes, almost like appreciation. Almost like the device in back was tuning to the road's glitch, not causing it. The module's phi drift line spiked when the hawk was present, dipped with the crow, steadied at nothing. Patricia wrote that down on the back of a fuel receipt. She wrote down everything the way you do when you don't know which data will save you. On loop 8, the glint in a far field moved, an irrigation pivot, and the light around her trailer dimmed as if the device were squinting. Monitor only, the tech had said. That had been a lie, or more accurately, a half-truth standing on tiptoe. Patricia stopped using the CB. The voice that sometimes came through stopped trying to be a voice and started trying to be a feeling. A nudge between the shoulder blades. Keep moving, we study in motion, it suggested. Not in words, but in the way you hear a crowded bar without parsing any single conversation. "I'll move when I decide," she told it. She turned off the radio. She turned off the dash. She turned off the climate control. She opened the window an inch. The air that came in had no temperature. As a kid, she'd had a father who fixed things. He took apart radios on the kitchen table and made them behave by talking to them like a difficult dog. She heard him now, the voice of someone who refuses to be hurried. If it's in your system, it uses your system. The gray module talked to her truck, not just to the crates. It had to. She popped the hood at the next shoulder and stared into the Kenworth's patient architecture. Wires she knew by heart had new neighbors, a lead running neatly down from the firewall and disappearing toward the trailer coupler. The tech had said sync. Sync with what? She slid beneath the chassis and found a thin cable zip-tied along the frame. It wasn't OEM. It ran to the pigtail junction and then, via a sleek connector she'd never seen, into the trailer's harness. The cable's jacket hummed against her glove. She wanted to cut it with the Leatherman knife she kept in her pocket. She also wanted to ask permission of the red seal on the trailer door, as if seals had feelings. She compromised. She unplugged the connector with the carefulness of a bomb squad and wrapped it in an old shop rag to quiet the hum. The hum bled through the rag like bass through a wall. Her dash flickered. The module back in the trailer chirped 4 small notes, like a child unsure if it wanted to be praised or scolded. The light at the door seemed brightened and then, gently, went out. She climbed into the cab and put the truck in gear. 156, 157, 158, a breath, and then 160. Patricia laughed, a sound with edges. "Ha," she said to the idea of the world. "Ha." She kept driving as if the mile marker might change its mind. 2 miles later, 159 again. She smacked the steering wheel once. "Okay," she said. The device didn't like being unplugged. It hadn't stopped the loop. It had made the loop Patty. She could work with Patty. She liked Patty. It meant the problem wanted to argue in a human register. The phone vibrated. A text. "How's our traveler?" from an unknown number. She didn't answer. Another text followed, a link without a label, like a trap in a cartoon. Her head began to ache. Time manipulation or road dehydration, she couldn't tell. She took a sip of coffee and it tasted like the first sip she'd taken hours ago. Warm, metallic, hopeful. The paper planner lay open on the passenger seat. On a blank page. Impossible, she knew what she had written there. Someone had penciled a single line in neat block capitals. "Think noise." She didn't write that. She also did. She thought of her father and the radios turned to static. She thought of a thing that ate silence, whatever that meant, and how you starve a thing by feeding it the opposite. She turned on the radio to a channel between stations and let the white hiss fill the cab. She began to talk, not to any listener, just talk about the road. She named the mile markers, the cracks in the concrete like dragonflies, the clouds shaped like a flat boat, the billboard she was starting to resent. She narrated every lane change, every glance, every itchy place on her scalp. It felt foolish for exactly 10 seconds and then felt like work, and work steadied her. The hum in the trailer changed again, displeased, and then tried to harmonize. The harmonization failed. She laughed, which was the point of laughter. She drove another loop and saw a difference she hadn't authored. An exit appeared in the distance, a green slouch on the horizon. She hadn't seen it before. Route 40, Teutopolis, it promised. Maybe it had always been there, just beyond the margin the loop allowed. The hum in back deepened possessively. She turned on her indicator, and the indicator blink sounded both faster and slower, as if time had put a hand on each end of it and pulled. She merged right. The exit sign stayed where it was, like the moon that follows your car. She kept her turn signal on and told herself a simple story out loud. I am taking the next exit. I am getting off this road. The gray module chirped a chord in warning. Her dash clock melted 2 minutes and returned them flipped. The CB coughed static syllables that wanted to be stay. She took the exit. It wasn't an exit, it was a fossil of an exit. Gravel, weeds, a ramp that had never been poured. The truck rolled onto it anyway with a bump that didn't translate into motion. She felt movement in her bones. The world through the windshield felt still as a painting. No, she said quietly, to keep her words from breaking. No, you do not get to tell me concrete from suggestion. She braked hard. The hum surged like a stubborn child. She threw the Kenworth into reverse and back down the ramp that wasn't one, trailer straight as a rule, and then cranked the wheel and shot back onto the interstate lane markers that didn't want to be lanes today. She pressed the accelerator until the pedal hit the end of its sentence. The hum tried to widen in a way that would have frightened her. If she gave fear that real estate, she let the road noise drown it until the hum had to choose between being heard or being itself. She passed 159, then 160 again, then 161. She glanced at the paper page where Think Noise had appeared and on impulse wrote with one hand while steering with the other, I will not be your corridor. The words looked both melodramatic and correct. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This one left a voicemail. She let it sit for 10 seconds and then pressed play because she cannot help herself human. A woman's voice, professional like an accountant, said, MS. Williams, this is Kate with In Reno. We're monitoring your progress. Small drift readings are expected. Do not deviate. You are doing very well. Patricia hung up before she had to hear any more praise. She pictured a woman in a glass office in a mountain city whose air never smelled like diesel telling a person on a bad road not to worry about the weather. She pictured getting to Reno and seeing that office and saying nothing. She liked the thought. The road straightened itself like a breath after a sob. She saw a farmhouse she could not remember passing. Its porch light a modest apology. The sun decided. It slid down the sky like a heavy plate on a table. The gray module gave a last petulant beat and went quiet, the way a toddler who realizes it has lost the room goes quiet to consider a better tactic. At 163, a state police cruiser parked on the shoulder turned on its lights. Blue and red strobes is the most human thing a highway ever does. Patricia slowed and put her window down. The trooper approached with a face arranged half neutral, half warning. You okay, ma'am? He asked. Define okay, Patricia said and surprised herself by the quip. I've been driving the same 4 miles for longer than makes sense. He tipped his hat to the absurd. We get calls sometimes, he said. Phones go sideways out here. GPS too. People forget if they stopped for gas. You want me to sit behind you for a ways? Would you? She said, and she did not mean for safety. She meant be a witness. He nodded and walked back to his cruiser and pulled out and tucked in behind her like a shadow that has moral authority. With a cop on her bumper, the loop would be embarrassed to repeat itself. That was the superstition she decided to believe. 164, 165, 166. Numbers that felt like chewing a fresh mint. She resumed talking to the air, narrating lane changes. singing the alphabet because she couldn't remember the words to anything longer. At 170, the trooper peeled off at an actual exit that had actual pavement. He saluted out the window, a tiny flick, as if to say, "Not my fight beyond here." She waved back and drove until the sky bruised into real dark, and the billboards changed to casinos and injury lawyers with ties wider than their smiles. Every time she blinked, she saw the number 159 stamped on her eyelids, and every time she opened them, the number had the decency not to be there. She stopped in Missouri for 4 hours of bunk sleep she did not trust. She dreamed of gears that were also clocks that were also ribs. In the morning, her thermos coffee tasted like morning coffee, which is to say like forgiveness. West of Salina, the plains widened into something with opinions. The module stayed quiet except for one brief tremor near a cluster of radar domes. She whispered, "Don't," like a mother to a toddler in a grocery line, and the tremor thought about it and didn't. Colorado arrived. The Kenworth earned its grades. The crates in back hummed, sometimes like they remembered the loop fondly. A summer the way children misremember a fever as a vacation from school. She ignored them the way you ignore an ex who texts you at midnight. In Utah, she stopped at a view area and looked at a canyon carved by an element that couldn't care less about human clocks. She called the number from the pickup manifest, a direct line to the facility with the fences. A man answered on the second ring, sounded like he was reading his own mouth from a teleprompter. She gave her load number and asked, sweet as cough syrup, "What does phi drift measure?" Silence. Then field stability. What field? Another small silence, then a smile she couldn't see but recognized. "Your compliance is appreciated, MS Williams." She hung up in the middle of his sentence because she felt like it. The hospital in Reno sat on a hill with windows that committed to views. Men in scrubs with lanyards met her at a dock that had been polished clean of trucks. A woman with an iPad checked her seals, scanned the gray module, and frowned. "Did you alter the telemetry?" "I unplugged a cable once to keep my truck mine," Patricia said. The woman looked at her like that sentence had arrived from a language she couldn't parse. "It's back how you like it," Patricia added. "You've got your numbers." The woman softened to professional. "You got here," she glanced at her watch, 7 minutes early. As if to reward the words, she tapped an icon and a door slid open, and 4 men wheeled out a dolly like a small silver altar. Patricia signed what she had to sign, checked that the check cleared, and stood by as the crates went down a corridor that smelled like lemon. The gray module gave a satisfied chirp the way a dog sighs when it has arranged itself on your couch. On the last crate, the hum pulsed once, the note from the loop, like a friend lifting a hand from across a street. She lifted a hand back without meaning to. In the afternoon light, she found a coffee shop and sat by a window. Her hands shook as if she'd driven through ice. On a napkin, she wrote, one by one, the mile markers from 156 to 170. She drew a line connecting them and then drew a small loop between 158 and 159. She put a slash through the loop. She wrote beneath, "I am not a corridor." The letters steadied her as if they were bolts she'd tightened. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She was tired of unknown numbers. Still, she answered because the road makes you both suspicious and polite. A man's voice, washed of guilt by money, said, "MS Williams, we're impressed. Not many drivers disengage the sync." "Then you know not to try that with me again," she said. "We'd like to invite you." She hung up. She put the phone face down and watched her reflection warp in the window like a pond's. She thought of a clock on a kitchen wall, cheap and stubborn, and of her father taking it apart and putting it back together so it would keep honest time. She thought of a highway with a small bruise in it that healed when enough noise was made. On her way out of town, she pulled over at a turnout and took the rag-wrapped connector from her glove box. She walked to the edge of a drainage ditch and threw the connector as far as she could. It made a small, unsatisfying splash and sank. "Monitor that," she told the sky. She took I-80 east for home. Lighter trailer, lighter voice. In Wyoming, the wind bullied her in familiar ways. In Nebraska, the radio found a high school football game and she listened to someone else's clock run down. When she hit Illinois, she rolled her shoulders and looked for the old bruise. At 156, she smiled. At 157, she sang the alphabet again, badly. At 158, she named 3 truck stops that had never done her wrong. At 159, the post stood like any other, and the world did not flinch. Patricia tapped the face of her wristwatch like you do to check if it's real. It ticked without apology. She drove on time past a billboard for Betty's Pies and promised herself she'd stop next trip, whether it existed or not. Story 8. The Deadly Car. Kevin Martinez had been trucking for over 15 years, earning a reputation as a driver who never missed a deadline and had a photographic memory for routes. That's why it surprised him when the job came not through his usual dispatcher, but via a private call. The voice on the other end belonged to a polite man who introduced himself as Dr. Reynolds from a biotechnology company in Virginia. "We have a high-priority shipment that needs absolute discretion," Dr. Reynolds said. "Biological samples, extremely time-sensitive. We need them delivered to our Montana research facility within 48 hours. The pay will reflect your reliability." The pay was triple Kevin's usual rate, more than enough to pique his curiosity. He asked a few questions. What kind of samples, what precautions were needed? But the answers were vague. Standard preservation protocol. "Just don't open the containers," Reynolds said. When Kevin arrived at the biotech facility, security was tight. Armed guards checked his ID 3 times before escorting him to a loading dock. Several men in lab coats moved quickly, securing small metal containers into a temperature-controlled crate at the back of his trailer. Each container was labeled with barcodes and strange codes Kevin didn't recognize. No biohazard labels, nothing that screamed danger, but the entire process felt sterile, secretive, and oddly rushed. The lead technician handed Kevin a thick folder of paperwork and a satellite tracking tablet for the trailer's refrigeration system. He flipped through the pages, delivery routes, precise temperature readings, and a list of emergency numbers. One page, though, caught his eye, a waiver absolving the company of responsibility in the event of driver cognitive anomalies. Kevin frowned. "What's this about?" he asked. "Standard precaution," the tech said quickly, avoiding eye contact. "Just sign, Mr. Martinez." Kevin signed, though unease lingered. As he climbed back into his cab, he muttered, "Easy money, huh?" The first 6 hours of driving were smooth. Kevin took I-64 west, cruising through rolling hills under a bright, cloudless sky. The refrigerated trailer hummed softly, its tablet showing a steady 36 degrees F. Everything looked normal. By nightfall, somewhere in Kentucky, Kevin felt a flicker of confusion. He couldn't remember the last 2 hours clearly. He remembered stopping at a rest area, grabbing coffee, but couldn't recall leaving. When he glanced at his odometer, it showed he'd traveled 120 miles without any memory of the drive. Kevin shook it off. Maybe he was tired. He blasted the radio, rolled the window down, and focused on the road. But the lapses grew worse. 30 miles later, he blinked, and suddenly he was passing a way station he didn't remember approaching. Kevin muttered, "What the hell's going on?" He reached for his phone to call his dispatcher, but stopped. What would he say? That he was losing time, forgetting roads he knew like the back of his hand. At a truck stop in Indiana, he checked his logbook. His handwriting looked rushed, like someone else had scribbled it. Routes he didn't remember driving were marked. His receipts showed fuel stops he couldn't recall. Unease gnawed at him. He decided to check on the cargo. At the back of his trailer, Kevin opened the door carefully. The temperature hit him first, frigid, almost unnatural. The metal crates were intact, but frost coated their sides in odd, circular patterns like fingerprints pressed into ice. He reached out to brush one, and a faint shock jolted through his fingertips. Kevin slammed the door shut and told himself he was just tired. But as he walked back to the cab, something about the frost pattern stuck with him. They weren't random. They looked like handwriting. The next morning, Kevin's CB radio crackled to life as he crossed into Iowa. He hadn't touched it yet, and no one was around. Subject 47, stable extraction levels. A voice whispered through the static. Kevin froze. "Who is this?" he asked into the mic. No answer, just more whispers, faint voices like overlapping conversations. Shaken, Kevin switched off the CB. But moments later, he heard murmurs coming from behind him, faintly from the trailer. He pulled over and climbed out. The sound grew clearer. Voices, dozens of them, whispering in unison. Pressing his ear against the trailer, Kevin swore he could make out words, names, pleas, fragments of memories that weren't his. He yanked the door open again. The crates were still sealed, but condensation now covered them, forming faces. Blurred, distorted faces pressing outward as if something inside was alive. Panic set in. He slammed the door, heart pounding, and got back in his truck. As he drove, fragments of those whispers stayed in his head, repeating phrases he didn't understand. One voice was louder than the rest, calm and deliberate. "You're delivering us home, Kevin. You've done this before." Kevin nearly swerved off the road. Done this before. Kevin called the Montana facility listed in his paperwork. The receptionist's voice was chipper but vague. "Yes, Mr. Martinez, you're scheduled for delivery. We appreciate your cooperation. Everything is proceeding as expected." Expected? Kevin snapped. "I'm forgetting hours of my trip. What's in these containers?" The woman paused. "Mr. Martinez, you signed a non-disclosure. You don't need to worry, just follow the route." "I want answers." There was a click, then a male voice replaced hers. Calm, cold. "Kevin, your memory issues are a side effect. They'll be resolved when you arrive." Kevin hung up, chilled to the bone. He checked his logbook again. New entries were appearing that he hadn't written, in handwriting eerily similar to his own. Each entry listed times, locations, and phrases like memory extraction level, 78%. He realized with horror that the samples weren't biological at all, they were memories. And they weren't random samples, they were memories from other drivers, people like him. Kevin's vision blurred as a headache stabbed through his skull. He remembered flashes of other highways, other deliveries, roads he'd never driven. But in these memories, he was the driver. The realization hit. This wasn't his first trip. He'd done this before, and they'd erased it. Kevin's paranoia turned to desperation. He needed to dump the cargo, get off the grid. As night fell in Wyoming, he pulled into an abandoned rest stop. The voices from the trailer were louder now, calling him by name, begging for release. "Please," one voice whispered, "open us. We'll help you." Kevin grabbed a crowbar and approached the trailer, sweat freezing in the cold night air. His hands shook as he pried open the first crate. Inside wasn't a biological sample, but a clear cylinder filled with a viscous, glowing fluid. Suspended inside were strands of something that looked like neurons. The whispers became screams. Kevin dropped the crowbar. Images flooded his mind, flashes of other drivers strapped to machines, memories drained from their skulls. He saw their faces, the same faces that had formed in the frost. Suddenly, headlights flooded the rest stop. Black SUVs screeched to a halt, armed men pouring out. "Step away from the trailer, Kevin." A voice boomed. He ran. Kevin ditched his rig in the woods and fled on foot, running through icy fields until exhaustion overtook him. He eventually stumbled into a rural diner and called a friend to pick him up. 2 days later, news reports claimed his truck had been stolen and the cargo lost. The Montana facility was scrubbed from records and the biotech company's website vanished. But Kevin knew the truth. He'd been part of something monstrous, an operation harvesting memories from unsuspecting drivers, erasing their identities and reusing them like cargo. Now, Kevin lives under a false name, always on the move. But sometimes when he dreams, he sees other drivers' lives play out in his mind. Roads he's never driven, families he's never met. And every time he looks in the mirror, he wonders if the memories he has left are even his. The whispers from that trailer never left him. They come late at night, soft and pleading. "Kevin, you promised to set us free." Story 9. The Vanishing Driver. Carl Matthews had been driving long-haul rigs for over 15 years. He prided himself on being a no-nonsense professional. Clean records, on-time deliveries, no questions asked. That's why this new job felt like just another paycheck. A private warehouse in Memphis had called his dispatcher with a direct contract. Triple pay for a single sealed container. All Carl had to do was pick it up and drop it at a research facility in Colorado. No questions, no delays. The warehouse was tucked in an industrial park on the outskirts of Memphis, surrounded by barbed wire and security cameras. The guard at the gate scanned his ID without a word. Inside, 2 men in suits, not warehouse uniforms, escorted Carl to the loading dock. They oversaw the transfer of the container into his trailer, sealing it with a heavy electronic lock. "Deliver by Thursday morning. Don't stop unless you need fuel," one of them instructed. His voice was calm, but his eyes darted nervously toward the container. Carl signed the paperwork and climbed into his rig. As he pulled away, a sense of unease nagged at him. The warehouse didn't have the usual bustle, no forklifts, no other trucks. Just silence, like a place built for secrets. "Easy money," he muttered, shaking it off. He'd learned long ago not to ask questions about his cargo. By midnight, Carl was cutting through the empty highways of Arkansas. Classic rock hummed softly through the speakers, and the steady hum of tires on asphalt lulled him into his usual rhythm. Then faintly, a sound broke through the monotony, a dull thump from the trailer. Carl frowned, glancing at his mirrors. The electronic seal's red light blinked steadily, untouched. Maybe it was just cargo shifting. He cranked the radio up and kept driving. But minutes later, there it was again. Thump, thump, louder this time. Carl switched on his CB radio. "Any drivers out here running westbound? I think I've got a loose load." Silence. Not unusual for this stretch of highway at night, but it made him feel even more isolated. At the next rest area, Carl pulled over and stepped out, the cool night air brushing his face. He walked around to the back of the trailer, flashlight in hand. The container sat perfectly centered, the lock intact. But as he drew closer, he noticed faint smears on the steel door, dark stains that glistened under his beam. Carl leaned in. His stomach knotted. They were fingerprints, bloody fingerprints. He stumbled back, heart pounding. No way this was supposed to be sealed freight. Suddenly, a sharp bang echoed from inside the container, followed by a muffled scream. Carl scrambled back into his cab and grabbed his phone, dialing 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is trucker Carl Matthews. I'm hauling sealed freight out of Memphis. There's someone in the container. They are bleeding. The dispatcher's tone shifted instantly. Sir, are you in a safe location? Can you pull over? I'm at a rest stop off I-40, mile marker 212. I need someone here now. Stay put, sir. Officers are on their way. Do not open the container. Carl locked his doors and sat trembling, every muscle tight. The noises from the trailer grew louder, thumping, scratching, and now whispering. His CB crackled unexpectedly. A voice, distorted and faint. Driver, help us. Carl snatched up the mic. Who is this? Silence. Then another whisper. They are coming. His headlights flickered and the truck's engine died without warning. The dashboard went dark. The world around him felt heavier, as if gravity itself thickened. In the rearview mirror, Carl saw figures moving near his trailer, too tall, too thin, gliding silently through the darkness. Flashing blue lights approached, cutting through the eerie fog that had crept into the rest area. Carl exhaled in relief as two patrol cars pulled in. Sir, step out of the vehicle, an officer called. Carl jumped out, waving frantically. There's someone in the container, they are hurt. The officers moved cautiously to the back of the trailer. One approached the lock and frowned. This is a military-grade seal. You weren't supposed to open this. No, I was told not to, Carl said, panicked. But listen, they're screaming. Silence. The banging and screams were gone. The officer tapped the door. Nothing. Sir, there's no sound coming from inside. Are you sure? Carl's heart pounded. He'd heard it. He'd seen the bloody prints. I'm telling you, there's someone in there. The officer exchanged a look with his partner. We'll need to call a hazmat team. Stay in your truck. Carl climbed back into his cab, nerves frayed. Through the windshield, he watched the officers inspect the container. One suddenly stiffened, his flashlight trembling. Hey, these handprints. Before he could finish, the radio on his shoulder erupted with static. Both officers froze, their eyes darting toward the woods behind the rest area. Something moved out there, something fast. Carl's phone buzzed with a new message. Keep driving, don't let them stop you. He looked up to see the officers backing away from his trailer, weapons drawn. A figure emerged from the tree line, tall, skeletal, its limbs jerking unnaturally. Its face was covered in a burlap-like mask, stitched into a grotesque smile. Sir, get out of here, one officer shouted. Carl didn't hesitate. He fired up his engine, which roared to life despite having died minutes earlier, and floored it. In the mirror, he saw the officers firing at the creature as more shapes slithered out of the fog. The voices in his CB returned, overlapping whispers. Drive, drive, they can't follow on the road. His GPS flickered, rerouting him off I-40 and onto a remote back road. Against every instinct, Carl followed the directions. Hours passed like minutes. He didn't stop until he reached the delivery address, a nondescript research facility in the mountains of Colorado. Security guards waved him through without checking his papers. Carl backed his truck into a loading bay, heart pounding. Men in hazmat suits swarmed the container, unlocking it with a high-pitched hiss. The doors opened. Inside, there were no bodies, no blood, just rows of strange equipment humming softly. "What is this?" Carl asked one of the workers. "Not your concern," the man replied coldly. Carl stormed back to his cab, furious. He'd risked his life for what? But as he prepared to leave, one of the workers approached. "You're not the first driver," the man said quietly. "And you won't be the last. They always disappear afterward." Carl froze. Disappear? The man walked away without another word. That night, Carl parked at a motel. Exhausted, he collapsed onto the bed. When he woke up hours later, his truck was gone. His phone was wiped. His dispatcher claimed to have no record of the job. And when Carl checked his own wallet, even his CDL license had vanished. No one knew who Carl Matthews was anymore. In the weeks that followed, rumors spread among truckers about a delivery job no one remembered taking, and a driver no one remembered meeting. Some swore they heard his voice crackle over their CB radios late at night, whispering warnings. "Don't take the job from Memphis. Don't stop for them." Carl Matthews had become another ghost on the road. Story 10, The Lost Road. Luke Harris had been a trucker for over 20 years, and if there was one thing he trusted, it was his sense of the road. He'd crossed every major highway in the country, driven through blizzards, desert storms, and fog so thick it felt like a wall. But tonight something felt wrong. He was running a route through Mississippi, heading north on Highway 61, a road he'd taken dozens of times before. The radio was silent, and the only sound was the steady rumble of his engine. His GPS glowed on the dashboard, but every few minutes the signal would flicker. "Recalculating," the voice said over and over as if mocking him. Luke frowned, glancing at his odometer. The truck felt fast, too fast. He eased off the accelerator, but the speedometer barely budged. He pushed the brake lightly, and his stomach tightened when he realized the truck wasn't slowing down. "What the hell?" he muttered, glancing in his mirrors. The road behind him was swallowed in a thick mist, a gray blanket that made it impossible to see more than a few feet. His headlights cut a narrow beam through the darkness, but it felt like the road was stretching endlessly ahead. Luke's instincts screamed at him to pull over, but there was nowhere to stop. The road had narrowed, the shoulders gone, replaced by steep embankments disappearing into black nothingness. His GPS blinked again, the voice crackling like static. "Proceed north. Estimated time to destination, unknown." A chill ran down his spine. He hadn't entered a destination. Luke had driven this road hundreds of times. He knew every gas station, rest stop, and diner along the way. But tonight nothing was where it should be. The old sign for a truck stop at mile marker 112, gone. The familiar farmhouse with the big red barn, missing. In their place was a wall of fog that crept closer with every mile. His CB radio crackled to life unexpectedly, a burst of static that made him jump. "Driver, slow down," a voice whispered, so faint he wasn't sure he'd heard it. Luke grabbed the mic. "Who's out there? You seeing this fog?" Silence. Then another whisper, "Turn back." He checked his mirrors again, but the road behind him was gone, just a swirling void of gray mist. It was like the world he'd come from had been erased. He tried his brakes again, harder this time. The truck groaned, shuddered, but didn't slow. The mist thickened, curling across the windshield as if it were alive. "Turn back," the voice again, stronger this time. "I'm trying." Luke shouted, slamming the gearshift into neutral. The engine roared, the truck jerked, but still it moved forward as if something unseen was pulling him deeper. Hours or minutes, Luke couldn't tell anymore, passed as the road dipped into a valley. The fog was thicker now, glowing faintly under his headlights as if lit from within. His chest tightened, and he realized he hadn't seen a single other vehicle since the mist swallowed the road. His GPS flickered again, but now it displayed something impossible, coordinates that didn't exist. Latitude and longitude numbers danced across the screen, rapidly changing, spinning like a slot machine. The voice returned on the CB, clearer now. "Luke Harris, stop the truck." Luke's blood ran cold. He hadn't said his name over the radio. "Who is this?" he demanded. "Stop the truck," the voice repeated, urgent, desperate. "You're heading somewhere you can't come back from." "I'm trying," Luke yelled, gripping the wheel tighter. Suddenly, the fog shifted, parting slightly to reveal a shadowy road sign. Luke squinted, his breath catching when he read it. Mile 0, the last road. He slammed the brakes again, and this time the truck lurched violently. He skidded sideways, tires screaming on the asphalt. The truck finally stopped. The fog swirled around him like a living thing, pressing in on the cab, muffling every sound. Luke sat frozen, gripping the wheel with white knuckles. His breath fogged up the windshield, and his heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He grabbed the CB mic again. "Who are you?" Static hissed for a moment before a new voice came through, a woman's voice, calm but distant. "Luke, don't open your door." His hand froze on the handle. "They'll try to get in," she continued. "They always do." "Who?" he barked. "Look." Luke's headlights flickered, and for a split second he saw movement in the mist. Figures, dozens of them, blurry and pale, circling the truck. Some crawled on all fours, others shuffled like broken marionettes. Their faces were blank, featureless ovals, but he could feel their eyes on him. He slammed the locks down. The figures pressed against the truck, their hands smearing the windows with streaks of black tar. The cab shuddered as they clawed at the doors, rattling the handle. The woman's voice spoke again. "You can still get out, but not if you stay here." Luke swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his neck. "Where do I go?" "Follow my voice." Luke forced himself to breathe, staring at the swirling mist outside. He flipped the truck into reverse, slamming on the accelerator. The engine roared, but the truck didn't move. It was like the wheels weren't touching the ground. "Forward," the voice instructed. He hesitated, glancing at the figures pressing against the windshield. One slammed its head against the glass, leaving a spiderweb crack. Luke gritted his teeth, shoved the gearshift forward, and floored it. The truck shot forward like it had been released from a slingshot. The figures scattered, their shrieks muffled by the mist. "Keep going," the woman said. "Don't stop no matter what you see." Luke's GPS blinked again, the coordinates spinning wildly. Road signs flashed by, written in a language he didn't recognize. The mist grew thinner, but the landscape outside was wrong. Trees bent in unnatural shapes, and the sky glowed with an otherworldly blue hue. Almost there, the voice urged. Suddenly, the fog broke. Luke's headlights cut through open air, revealing the familiar stretch of Highway 61. He slammed on the brakes, this time stopping easily. Luke sat trembling in his seat, gasping for breath. His CB crackled one last time. "You made it," the woman said. "Who are you?" Static, then someone who didn't. The channel went dead. Luke stepped out of his cab, shaky and disoriented. He checked his GPS. It was working again, showing the correct coordinates. The night sky was clear and the road behind him was empty. No mist, no figures, When he stopped at the next truck stop, he told his story to a few veteran drivers. They exchanged knowing looks, and one of them, an older man with tired eyes, said softly, "You found the lost road." Luke frowned. "What?" "Some roads aren't meant to be traveled. They take you places you don't come back from. You're lucky." Another driver nodded. "We've lost people on Highway 61. Good drivers, their rigs found abandoned, radios dead, doors open." Luke didn't sleep that night. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman's voice, the one that saved him. Now, whenever he drives Highway 61, he keeps his CB on Channel 13 just in case. Sometimes, late at night, he swears he hears whispers in the static. And every time he passes mile marker 0, he presses harder on the accelerator, because he knows exactly what waits in that misty valley. Story 11. The Trucking Highway from Hell. Travis Walker was used to long, lonely hauls. With over 15 years behind the wheel, he had seen every kind of road America had to offer, from icy Alaskan highways to desert stretches that shimmered under the sun. Tonight, he was threading through the remote mountain roads of the Pacific Northwest. His load, refrigerated produce headed to Seattle. It was past midnight, and the winding roads were nearly deserted. The hum of the tires on asphalt and the low growl of the diesel engine kept him company. Outside, towering evergreens loomed like silent sentinels. Fog drifted in patches, thick enough to make the road ahead seem like a tunnel into darkness. Travis leaned back in his seat, sipping lukewarm coffee from his thermos. The GPS chirped softly, warning of a sharp curve ahead. He knew this road, State Route 97, well enough to navigate it blindfolded, but tonight felt different. The stillness had weight to it, pressing against the windows, making him glance at his mirrors more than usual. When his CB radio crackled unexpectedly, he flinched. "Get off this road." The voice was low, hoarse, and gone in an instant. Static filled the cab. Travis frowned, adjusting the dial. "Who's this, you out here driver?" Silence. Shaking his head, he pushed the thought aside. Maybe some prankster, maybe his tired brain playing tricks on him. He rounded the next curve, and his headlights swept across a figure standing on the shoulder. A man in a reflective vest, arm raised as if signaling him to slow down. Instinctively, Travis slowed. The man stood deathly still, illuminated in the glare of his headlights. His vest looked weathered, dirty, as if it hadn't been worn in years. Travis reached for the horn and gave a short blast. The man didn't move. As the truck rolled closer, Travis noticed something impossible. The man had no face. His head was a pale oval, features blurred like a painting smudged by rain. Travis slammed his foot on the accelerator, swerving slightly to avoid the figure. His truck roared past, and when he checked his mirror, nothing. The man was gone. "Jesus," Travis muttered, heart pounding. The CB crackled again. "Get off this road." This time the voice was louder, angry. Travis gripped the wheel tighter, sweat forming under his hat. He'd driven through exhaustion before, but this was something else. His instincts screamed to stop, but the winding mountain road offered no safe pull-offs. The fog thickened, curling low across the asphalt, and shadows moved in it. Figures, several of them. Some crouched, some standing tall, their heads jerking unnaturally as his headlights passed. A shadow darted onto the road, forcing Travis to swerve. The trailer skidded slightly, tires screeching against wet pavement. "Okay, Walker," he muttered to himself. "Either you're hallucinating, or this road's cursed." The road narrowed as it climbed higher into the mountains, switchbacks twisting like a snake. Travis's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. His CB radio hissed with static, and occasionally a whisper broke through. "Slow down, stop, turn around." But every time he glanced in the mirrors, the fog seemed to shift closer, swallowing the road behind him. He passed a curve where a guardrail was missing. His headlights caught the mangled remains of a truck cab far below, rusted and crumpled among the trees. A shiver ran down his spine. He remembered reading about that crash years ago. A shadow appeared on the road ahead. This one wasn't standing, it was crawling, dragging itself toward his truck with unnatural speed. Its arms were too long, elbows bending backward as it clawed at the pavement. "Hell no!" Travis shouted, flooring the accelerator. The truck roared forward, plowing through the mist. The figure vanished under his headlights, but the cab jolted violently as if he'd run over something solid. The trailer fishtailed and he fought to regain control, heart hammering. The CB erupted with multiple voices now, all overlapping. "Stop! Get off! Turn back!" Their tones weren't malicious, they sounded desperate. Travis's breath quickened. Were they trying to help him or trap him? As Travis climbed another steep grade, headlights appeared in his mirror. Relief surged in him. Another driver. He flashed his lights, signaling them to pass. But the lights didn't move. They stayed a perfect distance behind him, unwavering, too steady to be real. Another pair of headlights appeared ahead, followed by another. Within moments, he was surrounded. 4 trucks in total, all old models from decades ago. Their chrome was rusted, paint faded, and every one of them bore the same company name. Black Ridge Freight, a company that, Travis recalled, had gone bankrupt after a deadly mountain pileup 20 years earlier. The trucks moved in formation, boxing him in, forcing him faster. His hands shook as he clutched the wheel. The CB lit up again, a single voice breaking through the static. "Don't fight them, Travis. Let them take you." He slammed the radio off. His engine roared as he pushed the truck harder, but the road ahead curved sharply. He hit the brakes, praying for traction. The trailer skidded dangerously close to the edge, gravel spraying off the cliff. The phantom trucks closed in, their headlights bright as suns. The road ahead didn't look familiar anymore. The yellow lines had faded, and the trees that lined the mountainside now leaned inward, branches like skeletal fingers. Travis blinked, realizing something horrifying. He hadn't passed a single-mile marker in over 30 minutes. The road was stretching, twisting, trapping him. The ghost trucks surrounded him, their horns blaring a deep, mournful sound. In their lights, he caught glimpses of their drivers, or what used to be drivers. Hollow faces stared back at him, their jaws hanging open, mouths moving silently. He screamed, wrenching the wheel to the left. The rig jackknifed, but instead of crashing, the world seemed to fold around him. The road curved into blackness, and for a terrifying moment, he felt weightless, like the truck had left the ground entirely. Then everything stilled. The fog cleared slightly, revealing a long, endless highway lined with hundreds of trucks. Some were rusted shells, others pristine, but all bore company names he recognized from old trucking magazines, companies long out of business. He wasn't in Washington anymore. He wasn't anywhere he knew. Travis's truck rolled to a stop, his engine dead. He stumbled out, legs trembling. The air was thick and cold, filled with the faint scent of diesel and burnt rubber. Figures stood along the shoulder, truckers, dozens of them. Some had missing limbs, others were charred, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. They watched him silently. A man in a tattered Black Ridge Freight jacket stepped forward, his voice deep and gravelly. "You shouldn't have taken this road tonight, Walker. We tried to warn you." Travis backed up. What is this place?" The man pointed to the horizon. In the distance, the endless highway stretched, vanishing into darkness. This is where the road ends for us, for all of us who died here. And now you're part of the convoy. Travis's heart pounded. He turned to his truck, but it had vanished. In its place was an old rig with his name already painted on the door. The man handed him a worn CB radio. "You'll get used to it. Help warn the living. Try to keep them from joining us." Travis felt the cold metal in his hands. Around him, the spirits climbed back into their trucks, engines roaring to life. The convoy moved forward into the eternal darkness, and Travis, trembling, climbed into his new rig. His headlights flickered on, illuminating the endless highway ahead. The voice of another driver crackled over the CB, panicked, asking for help. Travis gripped the mic, his voice steady but hollow. "Driver, get off this road.